Mother's Day is coming, and while moms always love flowers, you know what's even better? Something handmade from the heart that will last more than a week. So in this video, I have put together 10 full tutorials of great ideas for things to make for mom. So whether your mom loves to read, or play in the garden, or you just want to give her something to make her feel special and pampered, there is going to be something in this group of tutorials that I think your mom will love. I'm back with more reading pillows. These are so much fun. You can do it with or without a handle. It has a cute little pocket to hold your book. I did a reading pillow tutorial before that used a panel on the back, so you couldn't take it off to wash it. And that was the biggest request that I've had for that pattern. I now am bringing out a new pattern in my Etsy shop to do reading pillows in 4 sizes. In this video, we're going to walk through the 18 by 18 inch size, and I'm going to show you how to put a zipper hidden in the back so that you can take the pillow in and out if you ever need to wash this. The pattern will also include directions with photos for how to do this envelope. So it opens like that and you just pull that out. So that will be included there as well. So without further explanation, let's get sewing. Before I get into all the fabric pieces that we need, I want to show you on a finished pillow because it's going to make a lot more sense. And in the written directions that you can get in my Etsy shop, it's all labeled. And then there are also charts that show you all the sizes and your 2 back options. So this is a completed reading pillow. It has one big square, which is this white, then a pocket, which is going to have fabric on both sides. I like to put this fabric on the top because it just makes the top where you're putting your book in and out a lot stronger than if we had just sewn these 2 pieces of fabric together. So I think having that, it's pretty and it is also useful. The handle is totally optional. If you want to just be able to hang it up or carry it around like that, you can do that or you can skip it. So those are the pieces for the front. Then the back, there's 2 different ways that this can be done that are in the pattern you can get on Etsy. This one is an envelope back, basically 2 pieces of fabric that overlap, and then you can pull the pillow in and out like that. This is the best for beginners, quick and easy, and just a little bit of a different look. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a zipper back. And that is what this is going to look like. So we're going to have 2 pieces of fabric. We're going to have this little strip of fabric that overlaps and hides the zipper. So it's just a different finish, a different look and feel, and it's a good way to practice zippers. So now that I've shown you on a pillow, let's look at all of the pieces involved. Okay, so these are the pieces that we need for the front. This is the handle fabric, which is 8 inches wide by 4 or 5 inches. Then you have your square. I like to do my squares a 1/2 inch larger than the size of my pillow. A lot of people will do the same size, but I feel it is a little bit too tight once you do your seam allowances and have to shove everything in there. So I like to give my covers a little bit more grace. We're doing the 18 inch pillow. This is 18.5 inch square. And I have already adhered fusible fleece to the back. I use the Pellon 987F. And you just follow their directions and you're going to cover the entire back with that. It gives it a little bit more body and shape. So this is going to be like this section. It will be covered by the pocket. Then for the pocket, you need 2 pieces of fabric. This one is going to be 18.5 inches wide, 11.5 inches tall. I put the fusible fleece on the back of that already as well. And then I just need a fabric for the inside. You're not going to see this, so you can use anything. Use what you have left for the inside of your pocket. And then I have already pressed this because I made another pillow and used this same trim. So this is the piece that is going to go over the edge of the pocket like this to give it that extra stability. And for the 18 inch reading pillow, this is cut to 2 inches wide by 18.5. You'll notice it's longer than 18.5 inches because I just took a width of fabric and used it for 2 different pillows. So if you have a scrap of fabric that you want to use there and it's longer, I would sew it onto the pocket before cutting it to size. That's just how I like to do it. So those are the fabrics for the front. Now let's talk about the back. Here we're going to have 2 different pieces, and then you want a zipper that is at least 1 inch or 2 wider than your fabric, especially if you're not used to using zippers a lot, this is just going to be a lot easier. Now, normally I would use a zipper like this, where you're going to see it. It's not an invisible zipper, and it usually has a metal clasp, but I didn't have one long enough in this style, but I did have one long enough in this invisible zipper style. So I'm going to be using this, even though I really don't care if it's invisible, because it's going to have the flap over it. But the size is right, and I had it in my stash, so it's definitely what I want to use. Then I have this piece of fabric that is 2.5 inches, and this is going to be the flap that is going to come down and cover the zipper. All of these I have cut to 19.5 inches wide, an inch wider than the front of the cover, and then it's going to need to be when we're sewing the front to the back. And that is because sometimes when you put the zipper in, things might shift a teeny bit. Sometimes things don't work out perfectly, so I prefer, especially for this, to make it a little bit oversized and then cut it to the perfect size instead of starting with all of these the perfect width and having them not be perfect, and then your pillow's not as good. So that is how I will be doing this project. And then we have a piece of fabric that is 3 inches by 4 inches, and that is going to be to make the little tabs on the zipper so that the zipper isn't going all the way in to the seam allowance. It makes sewing the pillow together a lot better. Okay, so those are all of the fabrics. And again, in the written pattern, you'll get charts to do all 4 sizes, 12 by 12, 16 by 16, 18 by 18, or 20 by 20. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the inside fabric for the pocket. I'm going to put it right side down, and then the outside, the side we're going to see on the pillow, right side up. The fleece, again, is already fused onto this fabric. So we're just going to line these 2 fabrics up, making sure that top edge is lined up the best, because our next step is going to be to sew this on top. You can use clips or pins. I like to use clips whenever possible. Let me know in the comments if you're a clip or a pin person. You're just going to line the raw edges of these 2 fabrics up with the inside fold of this. And because my fabric is a little too long and that is a selvage, I want to make sure that is off the end and will get cut off. So I'm just going to be clipping that together. Now we're going to make our handle, and I'm using an 8 inches by 4 inches. Sometimes I use a 5-inch high for this large of a pillow, but because I already had a piece that was 4 inches, we're going to go with that. So I'm going to turn it wrong side up. I'm going to fold it in half and press. I'm going to use my quilter's clapper, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's one of my favorite things. It is an unfinished piece of hardwood. It absorbs the heat and it helps that fold become crisper. It also helps the fabric not be as hot to the touch. Then I'm going to open it up and I'm going to fold each raw edge right into that fold line that we made. And I'm going to press, but not press on that fold line, because we're going to want that again. So what we're doing is we're basically making a 4-layer handle. So there's going to be enough fabric that it's going to have some stability. If you want it to be even stiffer, you could put some lightweight interfacing in there. And it is also going to be encapsulating these raw edges inside, because when we fold that back in half, you're never going to see those raw edges again. Just press that. And then I usually just put a clip on it, clip or 2, just to hold it closed. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this to the sewing machine. We're going to sew down this side to sew those together, up this side, and then down the middle, because that will just give it nice shape and keep it in a good form for the handle. Now, to sew the handle, because we are sewing off a raw edge that will be inside the seam, I'm going to use a leader fabric and not pull my bobbin thread up. So this is basically just a little scrap of fabric, and I'm going to start sewing on that, because then if any of the thread gets pulled under and there's a little bird's nest, it's going to be on this scrap fabric and not on our project. And you want to make sure you go back and forth when you get onto your project, because it needs to be knotted even though you started on the leader fabric. Then I'm just going to cut that leader fabric off. You don't have it connected to your project in any way, and then we can use that again. Now, just to save thread, and I won't have to start and stop again. I'm going to leave that there, and then I'm just going to start right onto this fabric. And once I get to where it's sewing onto the pocket, I'm going to make sure I go forward and back a few stitches to secure. And then I'm just going to cut these so that they're even with the fabric, and also cut the handle off. Now we're going to baste the handle. And again, remember that the handle is totally optional. If you don't want one, don't need to. So I'm going to fold my A square, which is the front of the pillow, my 18.5-inch square. I'm going to put my center right on an inch line on my mat. Then we're going to be putting the raw edges 1 inch to each side. So the inside of the handle is 1 inch away. So see, there's 2 inches in between these handles. And take a clip that right there, just so that it stays in place when we put the back to the front. I'm also going to fold and pin this down so that it's not going to make a huge lump when we put the front to the back. And then we're going to attach the pocket. I just take the pocket, make sure I have the front. That's our inside of the pocket. We're going to line up these sides and the bottom. Make sure this is nice and flat. And I'm going to clip that together. We're going to sew the pocket to the back of the pillow with a 1/4 inch seam. And we can do a 1/4 inch seam because when we sew the back to the front, we're going to be using a 1/2 inch seam. So you won't see any of that stitching. I'm going to work on the zipper tabs, which are going to help the zipper go into the back. And I originally showed you this, which was 3 inches by 4 inches, but that is actually incorrect. We want it to be 4 inches by 3 inches. Now, if you're using non-directional fabric, it doesn't matter at all. It's going to be hidden, so it doesn't totally matter at all. But if we kept it this way, all our flowers would be sideways on the edge of the zipper. So I just cut a new piece. So all we need to do right now is put this wrong side up and fold this over about a 1/4 inch and press. Now we're going to work on the zipper and putting fabric tabs on either end, the length that we need them. And if you don't have zipper love, hopefully I can help you with that. It's not as difficult as a lot of people make it out to be. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to cut this in half. So we have two 2-inch wide by, I guess, 2 3/4 now that we have folded that down. So it's going to be 1 for each end. If you're using a zipper like this, which as I said, I normally would, but I didn't have the right length, it might have a metal end on it. Now, you can leave that, but I will tell you when I used it, I mistakenly hit that with my needle. My machine made an awful noise, broke the needle, could have messed up my machine. So now I'm never leaving those on again. What I would do is zigzag across the teeth and then cut that off. This is basically a stopper so that when you do the zipper, it stops and it doesn't come right off of the fabric. We are going to be working with this zipper, which is actually an invisible zipper that's designed to not show even without doing the little flap thing. Like this is the kind that is often put on the bottom of a pillow. And this one doesn't have metal on the end. It just stops, like it's not pulling apart. So we don't have to worry about that zigzag part. So that's one beautiful thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our zipper right side up. So when you look at your zipper, this would be the right side of this type of zipper, and this is the right side of an invisible zipper. So an invisible zipper, you see the teeth. When it's the wrong side, you just see fabric and the line when it is the right side up. So we're going to have this right side up. Then we're going to put one of these fabrics wrong side up, so basically right sides together, and we're going to put that centered on our zipper. Now we're going to keep those in place. I'm going to turn this over. So we're going to fold the pressed side first over the zipper and just have it lined up. You don't want it pulling, you just want it lined right up with the fabric tape, they call this, of the zipper. And then we're going to fold the other side, which is just the raw cut edge. You definitely want this first because when we then flip it, this will be on top. And we want the folded edge on top, not the raw edge. So we're just going to do that. And then I'm just going to grab a clip and I'm going to clip that. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch from this edge just straight across. So we have this G fabric sewn on this edge. This was the easy one. We're just going to flip that forward. It doesn't matter that these are separated because that will be held together when it is in the seam. And we're going to keep our zipper upside down. Now, in the directions on my Etsy shop, I said to take the width of your A fabric, and that is your big square that is the front of your pillow. And just mark the width on here, either with clips or tape. But now that I'm doing a video, I'm like, why don't we just use the actual A fabric? Way easier to judge by. So I'm putting this fabric right on my mat, and we're going to use this as a guide. Now, mind you, we're using the big square from the front, and we're not using these rectangles that we're actually going to sew this onto because this is wider. We're going to cut it to this size once we get the zipper on there. So we need to gauge where these go based on this size. That's super important. Another rookie mistake that we've all made at some point is you're like, okay, I have a tab over here. I need to put a tab over here. And you put it and you fold it and you sew it. And then you realize my zipper pull is not in the center where it needs to be. So the next step, we need to open this. So make sure you have pulled this, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches down. We're going to place this sewn edge 3/4 of an inch to an inch, you can fudge that, from the edge on this side. Now, the one thing that's tricky when you have your zipper open and you're sewing things, you have to make sure that these teeth stay lined up so the zipper is going to work. So if it's, pushed like that, it's not going to close. So it's really important that we hold this together and we make sure that stays where it needs to be. We're going to be putting this edge 1/2 inch from this edge. So I'm going to put this here where it's going to go. And then you can either use a pin or I am going to use painter's tape because it's not going to leave any residue on the zipper, but it's going to hold that together more securely than using a pin because this would slide on the edge of the pin. So we're just going to do it this way. Now, because we have this upside down, this is going to be, we need it right sides together. So we're going to put our fabric face up, our zipper face down, make sure this edge is about 1/2 inch. Double check that this edge is 3/4 of an inch from this end. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did on this one. We're going to fold the side we pressed first. And then we are going to fold the cut edge this way. Then we are going to put a little clip and we are going to sew 1/4 inch from this edge. Now it's really important to double check that your tape is outside and it is not under here. You're not going to be sewing on your tape. Make sure your zipper pull is in between these two things before you sew. Otherwise you're going to have to pull that out. But we have checked, zipper's in the right place, tape is in the right place, this is in the right place. Let's go sew that seam. We can take our tape off and then we're just going to pull that forward just like we did with the other side. The raw edge should be under, the folded edge on top. Perfect, perfect. The zipper's in the center and look at that. It is 3/4 of an inch from each side of this. We did a great job. Now we don't need this anymore right now. Next, it is time to attach the zipper to these pieces. So the bottom and the top. And then also we're going to attach it so that this piece is going to be folded in half and come down and hide it. So it just looks like a cute little flowers in the middle of the covered bridges. So I'm going to put it on the smaller piece first. You can do either way. I like to visually make sure everything is lined up correctly. Front of the fabric, front of the fabric, front of the zipper. And then I just flip the zipper down to make sure we have right sides together. The right side of the zipper to the right side of the fabric. Then we are going to center this onto this fabric. So looking at these edges, get them pretty centered. And then we're going to be lining up the edge of the fabric and the edge of the fabric tape. Now you can use pins, you can use clips. I'm also going to link to a video that shows you a couple other ways to do this to make this nice and easy. If you are new to zippers, I would recommend you take a look at that video. I show you how to use a glue stick or how to use fusible tape to really hold this in place. But I'm just going to use the clips. So we're just lining up these raw edges. So we're going to be using a zipper foot on our sewing machine. They freak people out a little bit more than they need to, but it's basically a very nicely sized foot so that you are sewing as evenly close to these zippers. Now, the trick to a quality zipper installation, it sounds fancier when you call it that, is to not sew past this. Now, if you have your zipper foot going past the zipper pull, it's going to move a little bit. And then when you turn it, it's going to have like this little wavy section. So I'll show you this when we're sewing, but I just want to explain it when you can see this a little better. We're going to sew, we're going to stop about here, about an inch from this. We're going to keep our needle down. We're going to lift the foot, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to move the zipper behind the foot. That way, you're going to have a nice, even seam. Now, if you're new to sewing zippers or don't sew them often, make sure you refer to your sewing machine instruction manual or look it up online because everyone's going to work a teeny bit different. The basics are going to be the same, but some things might vary. For example, when I start sewing, mine automatically goes forward and backwards, and some may or may not. And I am using a walking zipper foot. I like any kind of foot that I can get that walks, I'm down for it. So I have my zipper foot on, and I have the needle, so you can see it, set to the left. So I'm going to have the right side of the foot lined up with the right edge of the zipper tape and the fabric, and then the left placed needle will go next to the zipper teeth. It can also be shifted so that the needle is on this side if I wanted to sew down this side of the zipper. So because I didn't glue or tack this down in any way, I'm just going to move slowly and make sure everything stays lined up as I go. And I'm going to show you when and where to stop to move the zipper pull so that everything stays straight and you don't get a weird wobble. So I like to stop about an inch before, keep the needle down, lift your foot, and then just flip that up a little bit. And we're going to grab that zipper pull and we're going to move it until it is well behind where we're sewing. Then I'm going to make sure everything stays lined up again, put the foot down and keep on going. Now when I get up here, it's a little bit thicker, so I like to hold it down with my scissors. I feel like this foot, you're most likely to put the needle through your finger because there's really not a lot stopping you. So make sure you're using scissors or something else so that you're not too close to that needle. Now that our zipper is on, we're going to be pressing it forward, but first I'm just going to press right along that stitching just to flatten it. You can see it's a little wobbly, so we're going to set that seam. And I'm just pressing to the side of the zipper. All right, that's flatter. And hit it with my tailor's clapper. Tailor's clapper is basically the same thing as a quilter's clapper, but longer. Now I'm going to turn it over, push that forward, and press the fabric so it is away from the zipper. Now I'm just going to run back to the sewing machine and just do a quick top stitch really close to the edge just to hold the fabric and that zipper tape down nicely. So to top stitch, if I wanted to have the zipper on the right-hand side, I would move this needle so that it went to the right, or I could simply turn this around and sew this way and I don't have to move my needle. I'm going to just do that. And I'm going to sew with the left side of the foot on the left side of this fold so that our stitching is going to be nice and close. And just like before, you don't want to sew right past this zipper pull. So I'm going to lift the foot, put that well behind where we've already sewn, put the foot down and finish up. So now that is pressed, we have a nice top stitch. It's all well secured. So now we need to get the top part of the back onto this. The first step is to take our rectangle and fold it and press it in half, wrong sides together. So this is going to be the flap that's just going to be cute on the back and cover that zipper. And just like the last time, you want to have your zipper open a little bit, and we're going to do the same thing where we move it as we sew to that area. You're going to be having to feel for it this time because you won't see it as you're sewing because we're going to have all of this over top. We're going to line up the edges with the edges of this fabric, and you'll see this is a little bit longer because this must have kind of pulled a little bit, and that's why we made it a little bit oversized. So just center this and match the raw edge with the edge of the zipper tape. Then we are going to take the top of the back, and just like when I put the zipper, I like to visually make sure it is right side up, because the last thing we want to do is sew it together and realize that they're upside down. So if you're using non-directional, it doesn't matter. But I am using directional fabric, obviously, so I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to flip it forward. That way I know that when I press it, it will be in the correct direction. And I'm just going to add this to the sandwich, lining up these sides and these raw edges. So up here, not only do we have the zipper tape and a fabric, we also have the 2 layers of this flap. So I'm just going to clip this together really well, and then we're just going to sew that the same way we sewed the other. There's just going to be a little bit more fabric there. So I'm going to do more clipping since I'm not gluing this. And you can also use pins, of course. As I do all this clipping, I'm going to mention that if you like these videos, if you like doing easy sewing tutorials, sewing tips, tricks, and techniques, and beginner quilting, I hope you have subscribed to my channel. Hit that bell so that YouTube will notify you when I post a new video. All right, so we're going to go back to the sewing machine and sew that on. Now, just like with the other side, I'm going to have the right side of my zipper foot lined up with these raw edges. I'm going to be paying close attention to make sure everything stays together, and my needle is to the left and it will go right next to that zipper. Now, as I'm sewing, I'm feeling down here to make sure I find that zipper pull, which is right there. So I'm going to take a few more stitches, needle down, lift the foot. I'm going to pull this all back so I can find that zipper pull, and then I'm going to close the zipper well past where we've already sewn. That is going to avoid that little bubble bump that you might get and that often turns people off from zippers forever. Just like with the other one, I'm just going to press over that seam, make sure everything is nice and flat. And then I'm going to push the top away, but leave this flap down across the zipper and press. So now when I go to do my top stitching, it's going to be here. It's actually going to still be on that zipper tape, but we're not going to be seeing the zipper as we work, again, because of this little flap. Now I'm feeling my zipper pull right here, so I'm going to get to about 1 inch from that. Crap. I'm going to lift my foot, pull that back, move the pull, my foot down, and keep going. All right, so that top stitching is all done. We are so close, I can taste it. Now, this is the back with our little flap for our zipper, and this is the front, and you'll notice that the front is bigger than the back, and we knew that was going to happen, and it was very purposeful. So what we are going to do is we are going to put these right sides together with the front on top, and we're going to center them. Now, if they're not quite straight, like this is a little smaller here than up here, you just want to make sure this line parallel with like the top and bottom of the pillow so that it doesn't look crooked on the back. I always use zippers that have plastic teeth so that you can cut through them. You can either cut through them with scissors, but because we have to cut all of this too, we're going to be using the rotary blade, which probably means it's the last time you're going to use this rotary blade because it might dull it a little bit. So now I'm just going to cut the back the same exact size as the front. And I'm just carefully shifting that around so that nothing moves. I want these 2 pieces of fabric to stay together in the same way, but move it so that I can cut. The next step is to clip or pin all the way around the pillow because we're going to turn it right side out through the zipper, which you need to leave open so that we can do that. So make sure you have left that open. And I can tell where the top is because I can see the pin where my handle was. And I have a whole system with my clips for how I do this. So I'll take a different color, like I'm going to take the red, and I'm going to clip that everywhere that I want to double back for extra reinforcement. So I'm clipping it where those handles meet. I'm clipping it at the top edge of the pocket. And actually, I guess that's the only places. If you do an envelope back, there's more places you want to double back than there are for this style. So I'm just going to do red there, and then I'm just going to throw other colors, and we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/2 inch seam, which is really weird to me because I would say 95% of the time I'm using a 1/4 inch seam. All right, so that's well clipped all the way around. Head to the sewing machine. Now we're going to be sewing with a 1/2 inch seam. And so I want to talk about a couple ways to do that. First, obviously, is to just look at the markings on your sewing machine and use that as a guide. My 1/2 inch is right along the edge of my feed dogs. And then this little white line here, but there's no line here. I find it kind of hard to follow, especially since I usually do a 1/4 inch and I just use the edge of my foot. So when I have the odd thing that has a different seam, I like to mark it. So the first way you can do that is with a seam guide ruler. And this has all the different measurements. And I'll put a link to another video that shows you in more detail how to do this. But I'm going to put this under here and I'm going to use the hand wheel so that my needle's moving really slowly. And I'm going to get it to go into the hole where it says a 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to make sure it is straight because, obviously you can make it really crooked with that needle in there. But I'm going to make sure it is straight with all those guidelines. And I'm going to put the foot down to hold it in place. Then I'm going to grab a magnetic seam guide. And I bought these together. I'll put a link in the video description. This is from Madam Sew. And so this is a pretty strong magnet and it'll just boom right there. Now, one bummer is because I have a top loading bobbin, I can't change my bobbin if I have this up here. But it makes a nice big guide to just run the fabric by. This would just go and I would just be watching and having it go right along that edge, nice and easy. Another way is to use a low tack tape, like a washi tape. A lot of people that use physical planners use this, or scrapbooking or card making, or painter's tape. So to do that, you can take any of your quilting rulers and you're just going to line it up along these guidelines, make sure that needle would be about that 1/2 inch, and then move your hands away and let that sit. Then you would just take some tape and you would put it just to the side. So now I have a really long guide that I can use. And because it is a low tack tape, it is not going to leave any residue on my sewing machine or anything like that. You can do the same thing with painter's tape. And now I'm going to sew all the way around with a 1/2 inch seam, doubling back to reinforce everywhere there is a red clip. So I'm just going to randomly start here and we're going to let her rip. Now the other thing, because I don't use 1/2 inch seams very often, I find it harder to know exactly where to stop when I get to the end. With the 1/4 inch, with my 1/4 inch foot, it has a little line that I look at, and like I said, I'm just used to it. So this is a way to fix that if you want to, or if you're new. I also, when I taught my niece how to sew, she really liked doing this. Just put your ruler and make a mark. You can use a pencil. This is a heat erasable pen. When my needle gets there, it is time to stop and pivot. So if you're a reader and you're going to be using this book for yourself, I would love to know what kinds of things you like to read. And if you have any book recommendations that you think I should check out, just leave me a comment and let me know. We're right back to where we started. So all of our sewing is done. All right, I flipped my mat over to the black side so we can see a little bit better what's going on. The next step is to clip our corners. And I usually just put it right over my trash can. A lot of people will do a corner at a 45-degree angle like that, but then you still have quite a bit of fabric that needs to fold into that corner. So I find it better to come and do 2 cuts. So come down at more of an angle. Always, of course, making sure you're not clipping any of those stitches. But this way, there's a lot less right in that point, so you're more likely to get a better point turn. Now these are a lot thicker, and you'll see I am cutting through some stitching here. That's just where we attach the pocket to the front of the pillow in the first place. It's this inner stitching that you need to make sure you don't cut, because that's what sewed the back to the front and is holding that pocket as well. So it's fine to cut through that first stitching, just do not hit that second stitching. Now, we left our zipper open, that's good, so that we can turn it. I usually open it all the way. So I have a nice big spot, but let's remember that there is a pin here holding that handle down. I may have poked myself more than once. So if I ever have things pinned down, I try and remove that pin before I really get into doing that turn. So I got the pin out, and now we're just going to turn this right side out and push those corners out. Here's something to watch. I was getting overzealous with my turning, and I was like, wait a minute, did I sew this together wrong? Because I'm seeing the inside of my pocket, and that's just because I turned too much. So just make sure when you're turning it right side out, you're just turning the back from the front. So you want your hand to be in here by the fusible fleece. not inside your pocket. And then it pops up a little funny just because you have this 1/2 inch. So I usually just press that down with my hands. Not that it's going to be flat because we're putting a pillow in here in a second, but look how cute. Now let me get my pillow. And I like to cut these off. Those warnings you have to sell. If you're selling your pillows, you have to leave this on. If it's for personal use, you can cut that off. And then you're just going to put your pillow in here, push the corners into the corners, kind of move it around so it's fluffed the way you want it. And then when you're happy with it, you just zip it up. So now all we need is a book. So let's review really quick our 4 sizes. That is our 20-inch, huge. Our 18-inch. 16-inch is the most common. It's the easiest to find. And our 12-inch. That is how you do it. And if you want to get the written pattern with all of the sizes and measurements and written directions for how this goes together that supports this video, you can find it in my Etsy shop, and it will be linked in the video description as well as on the video. Happy sewing and happy reading. I'm ready to stop reading, but I need a bookmark. Should I grab a receipt, part of the box from gum, or should I grab this super cute fabric corner bookmark? Obviously, I'm going to go for this. You know, studies show that people with cute bookmarks read more, retain more, and enjoy their books even more than those who use receipts or trash, basically. Okay, maybe studies don't say that, but I say that. I mean, look at how cute that looks. So I'm going to show you 3 different sizes that you can make, and you can decide which one you like the best. These make a great addition to a gift of a book. It's a super quick and easy thing to sew and sell, and it is just fun to have for yourself. So I'm going to show you 3 different sizes, 3.5-inch square, 3-inch square, and a 2.5-inch square. They are each cut from a square of fabric that is a 1/2 inch larger, so 4-inch, 3.5-inch, and 3-inch. It requires 3 pieces of fabric. 1 piece for the back, 1 piece for this full square where the book's pages are going to go over top, and then 1 that we're going to be folding into a triangle for that top corner. Then you're also going to use a piece of interfacing. I am using this interfacing, fusible interfacing from Heat and Bond, and it's kind of like a paper feel to it. It's just going to give the bookmark a little bit more shape and stability. And this gets cut a 1/2 inch smaller than whichever size square you are starting with. You're going to be turning over the back one, and you will fuse this right into the center. That way you're not going to have this extra paper inside your seam allowance. Your seam allowance will pretty much just go right around that. So those are the pieces that you need. Now these flowers do have a direction. The top is all up here, but they're not super directional, and they're not large icons like some of these are. So you can just cut that however you want, and if you fold it into a triangle and make sure you put it on here where the flowers are facing up, it's going to be beautiful. You just don't want to do it where the flowers look like they're falling down into your book. However, if you like using fabrics with more icons and you want to be more specific, I'm going to teach you how to fussy cut into any of these sizes, or how to fussy cut so that you have exactly what you want on the back of your bookmark. So let's get started. Now these sizes sound well and good, but what do they look like in a book? Let me show you. Back to our Secret Lives of Colors. This is the larger one, which is 3.5 by 3.5, which is pretty big, in my opinion. Then this one is the 3 by 3. And then this one is the 2.5 by 2.5. So you can see they're all going to hold the pages. They're just going to hold a little bit differently. And then if we take them out, I just want to show you, it doesn't really add a lot of bulk. You put a few pages around it, and it's not going to harm your book. Now, this is kind of a medium-sized hardback book, but what if you are just, reading an airport book? So let's grab John Grisham and see what they look like in here. So this is just a more traditional size novel, and that's getting a bit big, in my opinion. The medium one, I'm like Goldilocks in the bookmark. That's that size. And the smaller one. So I think this is my favorite. It works well, and the fact that I have the ruler that is the perfect size to make it makes everything that much easier for me. So I think this is my go-to size, but you can decide which size you like the best. Let me know in the comments what you think you would lean into. Would you be doing the 3.5 inch finished, the 3 inch, or the 2.5 inch finished? Let me know. So we're going to make another corner bookmark just like this. This is the 3 inch size, and we're going to put this little covered bridge here, and we're going to fussy cut so it is centered on the back. So I have a piece of fabric, and fussy cut basically means just to be very deliberate about what part of the fabric you're using. So if you happen to be lucky and you have a ruler, so this square ruler is the exact size that I need, it's 3.5 inch square, and it has this line here so that I can see what is going to be in that top triangle when I fold it in half to make that shape. Now, if I was making a lot of them at once, I would take a piece of painter's tape, or this is washi tape, which is just a very low tack tape, and I would put it on my ruler just past that line. I want to be able to see the line because then my eye very easily looks in this top corner. It's not going to mess around down here. So just visually makes it a little faster. Then I can just move my ruler around and decide where I want it. So do I want more of this tree, but then I cut off a bit of the bridge? Do I want it here? Anything under the blue won't show because that is going to be in your seam allowance. Anything inside the blue and to this side of this tape, so in this triangle, is going to show on your corner bookmark. So we could do that. We could do this brown one. We could do this white one. So you can just pick different scenes. We could do trees. The main thing is you have to make sure that the ruler is totally on the fabric. So if we tried to do it down here, it wouldn't work because our fabric ends here, but we need the fabric to go all the way to here. So that's one way. If you have the perfect size ruler. If you don't, you can use a bigger ruler and tape off the whole square, but I want to show you what I have created. I'm pretty excited about it. I do talk about fussy cutting a bit because I design a bit of fabric where I like to fussy cut. So I have a tutorial for making these 3 size bookmarks in my Etsy shop. So it's got lots of photos. We'll walk you through all of these steps, and it's also going to have these templates. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut these out. The gray is the 1/4 inch seam. So it's basically what this blue does on the ruler. And then you're going to cut out the dark part so that we have like a little window that we can use to figure out what's what. So I just take these sharp scissors. I love these Fiskars, easy action. They're really easy on your thumb. That nice point makes it easy to get into the corner and just trim out the dark section. I also added the size, like the size fabric, and then the size bookmark that you will make on each of these templates so that you don't have to scratch your head if you use them and then you come back another time and want to make more. Just make sure you're not using fabric scissors for this, obviously. Paper scissors, everyone, paper scissors. So that's how you make your template. So this one is the same size as the ruler. We can use this to do the same thing, right? So you're not going to see what's down here, but it's really easy. You don't have to tape or anything. You're just kind of moving the window and seeing exactly what's what and what's going to be where. So let's get a cutting mat. And I'm going to use this rotating one because then we can leave the fabric alone and move the mat and not have to move this quite as much. So this is what we're looking for. We want to have this bridge and a bit of the road in there. Then I'm going to take this, I'm just going to butt it up against there and cut. Now, if I was using the ruler, I could just cut around it, but then you end up with some weird lines sometimes. So what you could also do is take 2 rulers, take one that is basically as long or longer than your fabric, butt it up next to it, move that one, and then cut. That makes sure that your scrap that is left has a nice straight cut on it. And then it also has one edge lined up so we can do the rest just moving around. Now, depending on how much you use rotary cutters, you might want to just turn and be going straight on every cut because sometimes if you do it this way, you might angle a little bit. It takes a little bit of practice. I've even seen people that can do 1, 2, 3. I cannot go this way, and I can't really go this way very easily. It's faster for me to turn it. So rotary cutting around something is a skill that takes practice like most things. So now we have this ready, and we have our perfect corner. So now let's get this part. And I'm going to fussy cut this too. You don't have to. This is where your book pages are going to go. But if you have it on the table while you're reading, it looks cute to have the cute little covered bridge there opposite that one. And then we're just going to do the same thing. We're just going to move it around. But this time we're looking at the bottom left triangle instead of the upper right. So you can do it with the ruler, or you can use the piece of paper. So just turn it, and then you can just see what is going to be where. So now we have the corner and the bottom, and now we need to fussy cut the back. And this is just going to be the full square. So if we were using this, you can't really see through part of it. I guess you could print it again and cut that corner out, so then you have the full square if you think you're going to be doing a lot of fussy cutting like this. But I usually just do this, and then I like peek and make sure that all looks good. Now, if you were sewing and selling these, this obviously takes a bit longer than if you used a fabric more like the flowers, where you can just cut, and cut without having to pay attention to what is going on. You might sell it a little faster if somebody really likes what you've put up here. I'm not sure how much more money you would get for it versus something that is random. I'm not sure how much more value someone's going to see with this than with this, but I don't know, you could give it a try. And then I have a 3-inch square of the interfacing. So we have our back, our inside, our triangle, and our interfacing. And now let's go to the ironing board. So here are our 3 pieces. This is the back. So I'm going to turn that over. I'm going to put my interfacing, making sure the shiny side is down, because we want it to adhere to the fabric and not to our iron. Going to follow manufacturer's instructions and just adhere that. Now we're going to take this one, and we are going to just fold it corner to corner to make a triangle and press. This is going to be our front. This is our back. And I'm going to grab 3 clips. And the way I clip is very important too, because it helps me when I'm sewing, especially if I'm making a lot of these. You don't want to have to be checking and making sure you like where you're starting and stopping. So I have a system for how I do this. Ask my husband, I have systems for almost everything. So I'm going to put the front base fabric down. Then I'm going to put the triangle. I always like my triangle in the upper right. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to flip it so they are right sides together. Because these are directional, I want to make sure they're the same direction. I don't want this to be sideways or upside down. If you're using non-directional, doesn't matter at all. So I have all these edges lined up, and now I'm going to do 3 clips. The top of the triangle and the 2 sides. So I like to leave my opening at the bottom of my bookmark. I would either do it here or here. You definitely want it to be on this individual place and not on the triangle. So by putting my clips there, I know that I'm going to start here, go all the way around, and stop here, leaving as much of this as possible open for turning. The smaller ones, the harder it is to turn. So now we just need to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to just use gray thread. I could use white with this one, but I made a bunch earlier and I found just using gray, kind of neutral, I didn't have to change my thread as much. So we're going to sew around. And you'll notice I'm pretty much at the edge of that interfacing when I need to turn. And if I'm slow enough to stop a little bit short, I'll lift my foot, turn it 45 degrees and take 1 stitch, and then lift and turn. That is a way to make it so that your corners are going to be a little bit sharper. So it's a good habit to get into. You really do need to leave quite a bit of space on these 2 smaller sizes so that you can turn it right side out. Now, before we do the turning and the pressing, we need to clip these corners. And I like to clip from both sides. Make sure you don't clip where you have the opening, because you're going to need that fabric to fold under so that we can get this closed nice and secure. Now I'm going to turn this right side out. Now I want to show you one thing that sometimes makes me panic when I'm turning things right side out. You remember this is going to be on the front, but sometimes when you turn it right side out, your triangle ends up at, in front of the back. So if it's on the upper left and it's not fussy cut like you wanted, don't panic. Just flip it. It's just flipped in the wrong direction. Then I'm going to take a turning tool and I'm going to gently push at these corners. If you push too hard, you're going to end up with threads coming through because you're going to push through that fabric a little bit. So sometimes I like to squeeze it along the seams too. Helps get a little bit of a better corner. Then our opening, we just need to get those threads inside. And I'm going to line that up with my fingers first. And then we're going to press. I want it nice and flat, so I press it pretty well. And then I'm going to use my tailor's clapper. The quilter's clapper is their shorter one. Riley Blake calls the longer one the tailor's clapper. It's basically the same type of piece of wood, just a different length. But what it does is it helps to really flatten those seams, and it also takes some of the heat out so that it's not as hot to the touch. So now it is pressed, and all we need to do is sew all the way around the edge, and it's done. So if you want to sew and sell, or you like giving books like to grandchildren or friends, your book club, this is a great and easy little gift to whip up. Now that we have this pressed and we have it sewn and flipped, this is getting a little bit thick. So I'm going to use these little folded pieces of fabric. It was basically, I think, a 4 or 5 inch square. I folded it in half, zigzagged the edge to make these little pockets. I use it to hang quilts up. But I also use it to help even things up. If I didn't use it, we'd have that much space between this and my needle plate. But if I bump that up against it, it's now even. So it gives your presser foot and your feed dogs something to work with to get going. So it's a little bit easier on your machine, and it's going to make it so it doesn't kind of stall out on you. So now I'm just going to sew close to the edge all the way around. I like to start on this corner, this opposite corner, and sew all the way around. I don't want to be starting or stopping on the pretty corner of the bookmark, and it's a little more awkward to start over here. I'm also going to pull up my bobbin thread. So I put my presser foot down, put my needle down, needle up. By pulling up the bobbin thread, you're going to make sure you don't have a weird knot from your machine mistakenly and rudely pulling your thread underneath. So you're going to grab both. You're going to hold them back while you get started. So just take a few stitches forward and then back to secure the thread, and then you're just going to keep going. Now, as I sew, each time I turn, I'm going to put this back behind here just to keep things a bit evened up. Now with another one, I did try just sewing this part and leaving this top corner unsewn. It gives a little bit of a different look, but I didn't like it as much because it made this whole thing like a little bit puffier in the book. So I'm a fan of doing the entire circle, but take a look and let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments if you like it better when you just sew the bottom closed and up this side and leave the corner that goes over the pages unsewn, or if you like it just sewn all the way around. Then you're just going to trim the thread and it's ready for a book. All right, so what do you think? Are you going to take a stab at some corner bookmarks? Let me know in the comments which size you like. And I am going to get back to The Secret Lives of Color. It is a lot more interesting than you might think. So I'm going to drop a link to this book. If you like to learn about color and some fascinating little stories, you might love this book, or it might be one that you want to gift to someone in your life. Happy sewing and happy reading. So last week I was traveling and I had this big old carry-on bag for everything I might need when I was on the plane. I didn't want to just put my book right into this mess because then it might get bent, it might not look good. I grew up with a father who would read books and didn't even want to crack the spine. I'm not sure why, it was just one of his things. So book sleeve to the rescue. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a basic book sleeve. Great protection for all of your books. You can make these in any size. You can make them to hold tablets. You can use them for notebooks. For this one, I just put my notebook in there, also put my pen in there. So I just had to pull this out of the bag. Everything was nice and neat and in one place. I also have two patterns in my Etsy shop. One is for a book sleeve with a front pocket in 3 different sizes. Then I also have a second one with this super cute big bow tie. So this one has a pocket and the big bows. You can find the links to those below this video. They're all built upon what we're going to do today, which is the basic book sleeve with flexi foam and fabric. Who is ready to get started? Let's begin where we always begin, which is with the supplies. So for this simple book sleeve, we're going to need 2 pieces of fabric for the outside and 2 pieces of fabric for the inside. This is going to be one of the smaller ones. It'll be about 6 by 8 finished. So these fabrics are 7.5 by 9. And then we are going to use this flex foam that is fusible on one side. It's kind of hard to see, but you can feel it. And I am using Pellon FF78F1 one-sided fusible stabilizer. I believe they make a 2-sided as well. I just prefer the one side, especially for this project. And the foam is slightly smaller than the fabric, so we're going to cut this to 7 by 8.5. Then we need a pressing cloth, which is basically a piece of cotton. You can probably just use a thin piece of cotton, or you can buy them that are called pressing cloths. Basically, it's a piece of cloth that we're going to be putting over top of the foam and the fabric. We're going to spray it and make it wet with this mister bottle, and we're going to press. That is what the directions say. You always want to follow your manufacturer's instructions, and we'll talk about exactly how to do that when we get to the ironing board. But that is what the water and this piece of fabric is for. This is a turning tool. It's going to help push those corners out when we're turning everything right side out. And then I definitely like to use fabric clips versus pins because we're working with the foam, which is pretty thick. So it's easier to just clamp everything together than to use pins. Now, one thing that some people will ask is, what about quilting it? You may have seen quilted book sleeves versus just a regular puffy or padded book sleeve. And the difference is whether you sew through. So this is an eyeglass case, and I use the same material for those. But I sewed, you can see all these stitch lines. So this is a quilted eyeglass case. You could do the same thing with the book sleeve. Doing all these stitch lines through the foam does compress the foam, so it's not going to be quite as padded as if we just iron it on and let it be. Plus, ironing it on and letting it be is just a little bit easier, and we are going for the quickest beginner method, get these things done. So these are the supplies we need, and the first thing we are going to do is we are going to take our 2 outer fabrics and we are going to fuse the 2 foam pieces onto the back. So let's head to the ironing board. So you want to feel for the fusible side of your foam. I'm going to turn my fabric so that the wrong side is up, and we're going to center this. Now we cut this a little bit smaller so that we're not going to have this thick foam in our seams. We might have a teeny tiny bit, but mostly our seam is going to be next to the foam. But we want to get this centered. Now we're going to turn that back over. So we have our fusible side here, and we're going to adhere that to the back of this fabric. Now the directions say to cover this with a pressing cloth. We have the iron on a wool setting, and now I'm just going to wet this. This is a cool little mister. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm getting it nice and wet. And part of the reason is so that we don't scorch the pressing mat, and also so that we can gauge how long we are pressing, because when we're pressing about the right amount of time, this will dry. I have my iron set to wool, and I always start in the center, and you want to press down about 10 seconds, and then you're going to lift and move the iron. You're not ironing. The difference between ironing and pressing is the movement. Ironing, you leave the metal part down and you're going like this, like when you're ironing clothes. Pressing is when you're pressing down and then you lift and you move. Very important distinction, especially in quilting, but also in fusing foam. You want your iron to overlap a little bit because we want to make sure we get this bond nice and solid on the back of our fabric. And then it says to let it cool and then check the bond. I'm just going to make sure it isn't coming up. Always check the corners. If anything is going to be not bonded, it's usually going to be the corners. So if your corners are good, especially if you start in the middle like I showed you, you can assume that this is fused very nicely to that fabric. Now we're going to do the second one in the same manner. Now, one thing to note, you never want to iron on the foam. This is polyester, it will melt, so you always want to have it covered or be ironing from the fabric side of things. When we sew, I like to sew with the foam side up. Now you might notice this shifted a little bit, so it's not perfectly straight. Not a problem, it's going to impact a little bit how we sew. We'll just have to be a little bit more careful because we're going to go over the foam right there, but it's doable. You want to get this as even in the center of this fabric as possible. Now we have our outside fabrics and our lining fabric. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to go right sides together and we're going to sew the lining fabric to the outside fabric. Now, because I am using directional fabric, I want to make sure that I'm sewing this to the top short edge and not the bottom. Very important. So I'm going to put those right sides together. I'm going to flip it over because, as I said, when I sew, I like to have the foam on the top. It makes your presser foot move more evenly. Even if it ends up going over the foam a little bit, you can see what is going on and you're going to get a straighter line. So I'm just going to clip that together. And then this is the side, this is the top, so that's where we want the sewing to be. Right sides together and clip. I'm going to use a leader fabric, which is basically just a little scrap of fabric. I'm going to start sewing on there. So if there's any knotted thread or bird's nest, it is going to be on that fabric and not on my project. And this is a 1/4 inch foot. So if I put the edge of this foot with the edge of this fabric, we're going to be sewing with the 1/4 inch seam that we need. Now, when you use leader fabrics, make sure you do remember to go back and forth when you get onto your project so that it knots. I'm going to daisy chain right onto this next one. And I am on the foam very, very slightly. That's fine. You just want to keep your eye on the prize and be a 1/4 inch from that edge. You want to know what really gets on my nerves? When I filmed a whole tutorial and one piece is blurry. My camera above the ironing board decided to focus on my head and my glasses and not on what I was doing. So hopefully you will forgive me. I'm going to walk you through it with photos. So we had sewn the front and the lining together. Now what you're going to do is you're going to put the front down, so the foam side down on the ironing board, and you're going to fold the lining out. You're going to press the seam towards the lining like this. Then you're going to put everything right sides together, so the outside foam units together and the linings together, matching those seams. That's really important. That's the first thing you do, is match those center seams to make sure that gets lined up well. Once you clip those, then you're going to line everything else up, so the front fabrics and the lining fabrics clip all the way around. If you want to, you can use a different color clip to remind you where you need to stop, because you need to leave a section of the lining open about like this so that you can turn it all right side out. Okay, that's what was blurry. Now we're going to get back to the actual video. Thank you for your patience with my technical difficulties. All right, I had a bit of a false start, forgot to hit record. Hate when that happens, so I'm going to pretend I haven't sewn here at all. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to be a little more than a 1/4 inch from the edge along this bottom of the lining. And you want to make sure you go forward and back so that it is nice and secure for when you turn it right side out. I don't worry about that there because that is going to be on the inside. No one will ever see it. Now, when you get to these seams, you want to make sure they are staying flat and towards the lining, which may require you to use a stiletto or the side of your scissors. Don't poke through your fabric. to hold that down to get it under your presser foot. And then as I'm sewing, we have 2 layers of foam, so it's pretty fat here. I usually kind of press down a little bit to help the presser foot. You can see that the needle is mostly to the right of the foam. You might sew through it a little bit, but not very much, and really nothing to worry about. Just keep your focus on having a 1/4 inch from that cut edge. Now we are going to clip the corners, and I don't like to clip at a 90-degree angle like this, because then you still have quite a bit of fabric that has to fold into that really small part. I like to take 2 cuts. So I come in at more of an angle, and then I'm taking off more of the fabric from the edge. So I come like this, and then like this. But make sure you keep it a little bit away and definitely don't cut your stitching. And then you're going to do the same thing down here. And now we are going to turn this right side out. Feels a little bit different, turning something right side out that has the foam in there versus just fabric or fabric and fleece. And I like to use my fingers to get these corners out as best as I can. And then you can take the turning tool, put it in there, and very gently push those corners out so that they're a little more defined and less curved. And then don't forget that you have corners in your lining as well. So now I'm just going to take this to the ironing board, and I'm going to iron that flat and then sew straight across to close that. You can use a matching thread if you want to, but it is going to be down in the bottom of this sleeve, never to be seen again. So I'm just going to use white so I don't have to change my thread. Now we just need to push the lining into our book sleeve. You're literally just going to push that and then just use your fingers and get the corners of the lining into the corners of the outside so that that looks nice. There is a little bit extra fabric. It's not going to be completely flat. And now we're going to work on getting this seam on the top edge so that you're not seeing, or you're seeing little to no lining when you're looking at the outside. Usually you have to work the side seams the most because that's usually where there's a bit of extra material. So I usually do it with my fingers, and then I will press each of the side seams and press. Now sometimes this will look a little bit wrinkly if your bond isn't really good. We bonded that really, really well. There's no wrinkles. Don't have to worry about that. And now we're going to just go and finish it by top stitching around this edge. You can do a 1/4 inch, you can do an inch, whatever you want. I usually do about 3/8 of an inch from the edge, and that is going to prevent this lining from completely pulling back out as you are using it and putting things in and out. So you definitely want to stitch around that top edge. Now, because I have an industrial machine, I can't take the arm off and have this wrap around the throat of my machine. So I have to do it a little different than you probably do, and I have to sew from the inside basically. And because I don't have this perfect blue thread, and this has lots of colors on the outside, I've decided to switch to gray, so it will be less noticeable than if I was using white. Now, another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use a piece of painter's tape to help me have a really solid visual for where I want my guide to be. So I want to sew 3/8 of an inch from this edge. And I can just look at these marks, but it's a little bit harder to be holding this open, watching what's going on here, and keeping everything lined up. So I'm going to use a piece of painter's tape. I'm going to put it right on that 3/8 inch mark. Now I had shown in a short another time where I had done this and my tape had gone over this feed dog and it caused a bit of concern. I hadn't actually pushed it down because you don't want to stop your feed dogs from moving, obviously. They were moving under the tape, but I'm going to be much more careful from here on out to make sure I don't put them even on the feed dog. My goal isn't to confuse you, it's just to show you how to sew cool things. Because the bobbin is going to show, we don't want any knots, so we're going to pull up the bobbin thread. And here's how you do that. I have this lined up with the edge of my tape. I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to put my needle down, and I'm going to be holding this top thread while I put my needle down. And then I'm going to lift the needle again, and give that a little tug. And you can see the bobbin thread coming out. So I'm going to grab some tweezers and I'm going to get that thread out. Now I'm going to put both threads under the foot and pull back, and I'm going to hold them as I take a few stitches forward and a few stitches back. And now I'm just going to keep sewing. So with my machine, this is definitely harder than most people. I'm going to be watching this line, making sure the lining is staying in, and just moving it so that we can sew all the way around. Now I always cut these threads before I get back there because I don't want them to create a new kind of a knot. So now it is top stitched all the way around that edge. And now it is done. We just have this really cute padded book sleeve. And this is the smaller one. It's perfect for a mass market book. You can put that in your backpack, carry it, and everything is going to stay nice and tidy. Another thing I love about book sleeves is you can keep them simple or you can dress them up. Like this one, similar fabric, but I put little stripes here, little bands, just to make it a little bit fancier. Use some of my scrap fabric. This one, I put the band of argyle and otherwise just use this fabric. And then remember, in my Etsy shop, I also have patterns for how to do the same thing in 3 sizes with the pocket or with a pocket and a really cute tie closure to close that. So what do you think? Are you ready to whip up a couple of book sleeves? They're so quick and easy, it isn't even funny. They make great gifts. They're also a great seller. So if you are a person that wants to sew and sell, fund a vacation, make an income, this might be something to add to your list. Let me know in the comments what your plans are for book sleeves and if you have a favorite size or if you're going to be doing a variety. If you or someone you love finds their happy place in the garden, you're going to love this tutorial today for a 5-pocket garden apron. 2 big pockets, 3 smaller ones to hold all your gardening stuff. And it is so easy to make. I'm also going to show you how to make these ties. You always see them on Pinterest and social media where it's super cute and it's tied around in the front, usually on a petite model. So I'm going to show you how to measure and figure out what size you need to make you look cute no matter what your waist size. Because I'm going to admit, the basic size doesn't fit my waist. So you are not alone if it doesn't fit yours. Ready to get started? Let's look at what we need. So first, you're obviously going to need some fabrics. And here are what you need. I'm going to be using these chickens for both the front and the back of the fabric. So I've cut 2 pieces, 20 inches by 13 inches. Then for the first pocket, the taller pocket, I'm going to use these cute little windmills. And this is all from my Spring Barn Quilts fabric collection from Riley Blake Designs. So it feels a little weird that the pocket is actually bigger than the apron, but we're going to be folding it in half. So just trust me on this. I've made more than one. So for the bigger pocket, you're going to cut 20 by 16 inches. Then the smaller pocket is going to be black, and you're going to cut that 20 by 10 inches. Then you need 2 sachets, which you can do with the fabric, cut off the selvage 4 inches wide and just see how that fits. And you might have to tie it in the back, you might have to tie in the front, or you can jump ahead and see where I show you how to measure and figure out exactly how long you need it to be for you or someone else if you can measure their waist and make it so that it's going to tie super cute in the front, like all the garden aprons you see on social media. The last piece of fabric is going to be the waistband, and I decided for this one to have my waistband match the bigger pocket. If you look at this other one, I did that a little bit differently. So I did a waistband that matched the color, but not the exact same fabric. So on this one, I used 4 different fabrics, and I also did a scrappy sash where I put together some different fabric scraps that were all 4 inches wide and made it as long as I wanted, versus today, we are going to just use the single or the 2 long pieces of fabric. So that's your fabric. Now, it's really important that a garden apron have some stability to it because it's going to have heavier things in it like trowels and your phone and I don't know, all kinds of things that you don't want just flopping around. So you need some interfacing. You can use any kind of medium weight. What I used was this ES114 Easy Shaper interfacing from Pellon. I just went and bought 1 packet, which was 20 inches by 1 yard or 36 inches. I got the 3 pieces that I need, and then I have another 20-inch by 9-inch piece to use for something else. So for your interfacing, you're just going to cut a 1/2 inch smaller than the outside and both of the pockets. That's your basic supplies. First step is to get our interfacing on the back of our 3 pieces. I'm going to put it on the back of the apron front, which in my case, I'm using the same for the front and back, so it doesn't really matter. But if you're going to use different fabric on the front and back, I would recommend putting your interfacing on the front, and then we will do the 2 pockets. So grab your fabric, you're going to turn it upside down on your ironing board. And just make sure whatever kind of interfacing you use that you follow the manufacturer's instructions. So I do have those right here to check on. And then a fusible interfacing always has a little bit of a shiny side and a duller side. The shiny side is the fuse. So it is the stuff that you're going to heat and adhere to your fabric. So you want to put that shiny side down against your fabric. And we cut it so that it will be about a 1/4 inch smaller than our piece of fabric, because we don't need all this added bulk in our seams. And you do not iron right on this. You want to use a pressing cloth, which is basically a thin piece of cotton. And the directions say that it should be damp. Well, I'm not going to take it to my sink. I'm going to use this cute little sprayer. So I'm just going to keep moving my iron. You could also use a heat press. So if you have a big heat press or you have like a Cricut heat press, you could use that. And then you're going to be able to do a bigger area at once. When you think you have that all pressed properly, just lift it up and check the corners. Oh, this one, so it's pretty good, but I didn't quite hit the corners well. So just put your pressing cloth back down and give that a little bit more heat. You want to make sure it's just adhered nicely all the way across your fabric and definitely on those edges. Now let me show you how to do the pockets. And because we're going to be folding this fabric to make the pocket so that the inside is covered, we didn't need a piece of interfacing that covered the entire fabric like with the outside. We just need to cover half. So again, check that the fusible side is down and put it down on one long end and just leave a little bit for the seam allowance. And then we're just going to do the same thing. Put that pressing mat down, get a little dampness where that interfacing is, and press. And I'm going to do this for both of the pockets. So we have the interfacing on 1/2 of each of the pockets. So now we're just going to fold the other half down. We're going to line up all those edges and we're going to press the top edge of the pockets. So there's one. Now we have our 3 fabrics, the apron front, the bigger pocket, and the smaller pocket with the interfacing all lined up. Now we are going to do our lines to make our 5 pockets, and I'm going to show you how we're going to flip and stitch to get that done. So the first one we're going to do is this center pocket. And if you are using a directional fabric like I am, because you'll see some of these are flipped around, but most of them are coming in this direction, you want to make sure that this is the side that will go on the front of your pocket. Because if you did it this way, they're all going to look upside down on your apron, which is not ideal. So this should be 20 inches wide, just about, not quite perfect, but perfect enough. And I'm just going to draw a line at the 10-inch mark with my heat erasable pen. And look at that. That's going to be really easy to see where to sew. And the second I put the iron on it, any heat on it, it is just going to disappear like magic. So that is our first line. Now I'm going to start layering this together. So I'm going to put the apron down. And now I'm going to line this up on the bottom. Now I'm going to put the bottom pocket on and make sure you're putting all the raw edges at the bottom. So these are the 2 pockets. This one's going to have 3 pockets. So we're going to put a line 3 inches to either side of this center line. This is a chalk marker from Clover. Let's put it 3 inches from that center line and then 3 inches to the other side as well. So I'm lining up on that line and also lining up along the top edge of my pocket to make sure this line is going to go nice and straight. We're going to start by sewing one of the two lines on the small pocket to the bigger pocket. And it doesn't matter which one you start with. I do usually start on the raw edges. So if you have any issue with your knot not being great, it's not going to be at the top of a pocket where you might see it. And then I am going to double back when I get to that fold just to reinforce the top of the pocket. So let's just get one of those sewn. Now I'm going to get my apron front and I'm going to line up the raw edges on the bottom and the sides of both pockets and my apron. See that? Now the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to flip this bottom pocket section. I'm going to fold that back so that we can see the line on the larger section, and we're going to sew that to the apron. We can't just flip this back and sew here, or else you're going to have a really weird sewn section in this big pocket. So we're going to do a little bit more flipping. We're just going to lift the pockets, flip the apron fabric. So I folded that back. So now when I sew this second line, I'm only sewing through both of those pockets. So just make sure everything's lined up, and we're going to do this third stitch line. Now our pockets are sewn on, and I ironed it to get rid of the lines, got rid of the chalk marks. I trimmed a little bit on the edge to make sure everything was evened up. Now we are going to attach the apron front and pockets to the back. So we're going to leave this face up, put the back face down, or right sides together. If you want to have just squared corners, you're just going to pin and sew this together now. But I want to show you how to make the cute little curved corners. I'm going to use just a small Pyrex cup. I think that's like a 1 cup size. You can use a coffee mug, you could use a bowl, but I like the size of this, and I happen to have it in my sewing room. So I'm just going to put this on the two bottom corners and draw with my pen. I'm going to clip all these layers together so that they will be less likely to move about as I cut those corners. I'm going to put some marks just at the top so that when I'm sewing, I remember to leave that section open for turning right side out. One thing I love about this project is because we are using a waistband and we're not just using this top edge, we're not going to have to be as detail oriented when we turn and press that top, because that opening is going to be hidden. That's why you want to do it at the top and not on the side or the bottom. And then I'm going to hold my hand here to try and keep it from shifting too much, and then just cut that corner. Now I'm going to do the second one. Now you're going to take it to the sewing machine. You're going to sew all the way around, leaving this open for turning. And I'm going to use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance just because there are so many layers that if you use a 1/4 inch, it might just be a little bit too small and something might not catch very well. So I found that going a little bit bigger than that is better for this project. You could even do a 1/2 inch if you want to be extra, extra sure. Now that we've sewn all around that, we just need to clip the curves and also the corners. Because there is so much fabric here, I mean, look at that. I'm going to first trim this closer to the curve, so there's just less bulk sitting in there when it's turned. And then I'm going to do a bunch of little cuts. Now, normally I like to use pinking shears for this, but I tried that on the last one, and I'll show you in a second. It doesn't work super well. Just make sure when you're doing this, especially if you use big scissors like this, don't cut your stitch line. Let me show you what happens if you want to try pinking shears. If you try and go more than like 2 or 3 teeth from the back, it bends. So it can be done. You just have to go a lot slower. Next step, we are going to turn it right side out. And then I just stick my hand in here and get these curves smoothed out nicely. So now I'm just going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to press it, and you'll see it naturally just wants to lay like that, because these 3 pieces with all that interfacing are a lot thicker than this one back piece. So you do want to make sure when you're pressing that you get that folded over, because you just want the bottom of your pocket and not part of the back of your apron showing. Now that I have this nicely pressed, I'm going to edge stitch all the way around the entire apron, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And I've decided to use black thread on the top and a tan bobbin so it won't show as much on the back of the apron. Now that we have this all sewn together, we just need to do the sashes and the waistband. So I brought out my Skinny Mini mannequin to show you how to measure either whoever your apron is going to be for or for yourself so that you can make it super cute and have the sashes wrap around and tie in the front because you might need bigger than the basic with the fabric. I do, so don't feel bad if you do. So we're going to pretend this apron is too big for her. We're going to pretend that it is this wide, okay? And she's going to have, stop tipping. She's going to have it sit right about here on her hips. So what you're going to do is you're going to measure from here all the way around to the center. Okay, so I'm going to grab a tape measure and I'm going to put it right on the hip where the apron ended on the one side. I'm going to wrap it straight around and then I'm just going to stop kind of in the center because that is where we're going to want to tie. So I'm going to take that measurement, 27, oh, she is skinny, 27, and then I'm going to add 10 to 12 inches, depending on how much longer you want your sash to be. For the sashes, you're just going to take these long pieces or the pieces that you piece together, 4 inches by whatever you need. You're going to fold it in half, and then you're just going to sew one short end and all the way down the long end. I never pin this, I just make sure it's lining up as I'm putting it through the sewing machine. But if you're a newer sewer, teaching somebody to sew or just prefer it, you can pin it that whole length. So you're going to do both of those, and then we're going to turn those right side out. Now I want to show you one of my favorite things when you're doing long straps or sashes or whatever, bag things for bags, basically long tubes that you need to turn right side out. Now growing up, when my mom was teaching me to sew, we would put a safety pin on the end and then scrunch it. And I'm telling you, it is so hard on your hands to do that. So I want to show you how to use these fabric tubes from Dritz if you haven't used them before. It has a nice plastic tube that's slippery. That's important. And then it has like a dowel rod or kind of looks like a chopstick. So what we're going to do, and we're going to do this for both of our sashes, I have it sewn together. We're sewed across and down, left one end open. I'm going to clip the corner, just cut that off so that we can get that turned well. And then, it's the fun part. I'm just going to put the tube into the fabric and just push it all the way down. Okay, see, that's pretty long, but you're going to be amazed at how fast we can turn this. All right, next you're going to take the stick and you're going to insert it, just kind of push the fabric in the end gently. Don't do it too hard because if you really jam it hard, you could pop through your stitches or your fabric, which would be a bummer, but fixable. Anything's fixable on sewing, except messed up cutting. So you're just going to push that in, and then you're just going to pull that fabric down until you can see the tube and the stick. So now all you're going to do is you're just going to pull it like that. Ah, look at how fast that was. Oh my gosh, just pull that off. Now don't take the stick out yet, because what you want to do is you want to take the stick and gently push out those corners, and then you're good to go. Now all you have to do is go to the iron and the ironing board and pull that seam out and make it nice and straight and flat. I wish there was a tool that did that as quickly as this turns this thing. But you know what? This saves a ton of time over turning this right side out with a safety pin. So I'm going to take it. Now I'm going to show you how I figure out the perfect width for the waistband. I mean, if everything went perfectly, you would turn a 1/4 inch on each end and it would be the same width as your apron. But as we saw in the beginning, my apron was slightly off. So I just like to do it this way. I line my apron up with my waistband, and then I just fold it so that it matches, and I press each end. This way, You're going to have your waistband be the exact width that you want it the first time without having to adjust it later if your apron is slightly larger or skinnier than you thought it was going to be in the beginning. So see? Perfection. So now I can put that aside. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do each of these long edges. I'm going to press them under a 1/4 inch. Then the final step before we sew this on is to fold it in half. Moving right along, it is time to connect the sashes to the apron and then put on the waistband. So each sash, you're going to put the raw edges like this, about 1 inch in from the edge, and have the sashes going off the side. And now, just like we used the top of the apron to determine the length of the waistband, we are going to use the folded waistband to determine the tuck that we're going to put into the waistband. So you see, well, let's actually put it right on there so we can see how it is folded over. And you'll see the waistband is slightly bigger. We don't want it sticking out. So what I do is I just take a really small tuck like that in the sash, make sure it's going to be well inside that waistband, and I overlap about 1 inch, and then I'm just going to put a little pin in that, and then I'm going to sew a rectangle to get that nice and secure. I'm going to tuck this side the same way. Now our last step is to attach the waistband, and it's just going to fold right over the top edge of your apron, and it's going to conceal the edge of your sashes and make it all look beautiful. Now, if you want to include a tag, you could put it in the back. So I'm going to get this lined up so the fold is on the top edge and these ends are lined up correctly. And then I'm just going to flip this back. I'm going to put my tag there. Do you put tags on things? Lots of people get them made with their names, or there's so many funny tags you can get now. Let me know in the comments if you're a tagger, not a tagger. So I pinned that where it needs to be, but because I'm going to be sewing from the front, I'm going to just pin again in the same spot to make sure that I catch that tag. And then I'm going to take the pin out of the back because that's going to be easier to take out as I sew. So once you get this all lined up, you just need to pin across this edge. And then we are going to sew all 4 of the sides. This 5-pocket apron is ready to roll. If you're looking for ways to use your fabric scraps, why not consider replacing your disposable makeup removers with cute and functional reusable makeup removers? These are made from fabric scraps and baby washcloths. If it's soft enough for a baby, it is soft enough for my face. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these. And at the end, I will also show you how to make a cute and simple drawstring bag if you want to use them to give these as a gift or to sew and sell. Let's get into it. All right, I'm in the baby aisle and we're going to do some math because I think these would be really soft and nice for reusable makeup removal pads. So let's see which is going to be a better deal. You can buy 6 washcloths. They are $8.48 and they are 9 by 9. So you get about 54 by 54 less whatever this edging is, which we would need to cut off. Okay, so that's one option. The next option is to just buy a big towel. I feel really bad to cut that little face off, but let's see where the money goes. So this is 26 by 30 and it's $9.48. So this is definitely less material for the price. Winner chicken dinner, baby washcloths, because if they're good enough for baby, they're going to be nice and soft on your face. So today's goal is to replace these cotton rounds with something reusable that I can just throw in the laundry. This will be great for myself, also a great gift for teens or anyone who uses makeup and you just want to grab some fabric scraps and do something different. So first I want to look at how big this is. And this is just under 2.5 inches round. I've seen a lot of these made and being sold on Etsy and other places with a serger. And then they do the circles because it's really easy to just serge around it. I don't have a serger, so I am going to make squares. Let's take a look at these baby washcloths that we grabbed at Walmart. I'm going to save that ribbon for something else. That's a good piece of ribbon. And these are craft scissors, not fabric scissors, so I can cut all these plastic things with it without anybody needing to freak out, including myself. So we'll just take a look at one. So these are 9 by 9, but we need to cut off the edge. And I think we need to iron it first because we want this to be nice and smooth when we are cutting, and we also want our scrap fabric to be nice and smooth. I have these all ironed nice and flat, and I ironed my scrap fabrics that I'm going to use. Now, to be most efficient with this, because these are 9 by 9, but we need to cut this off, I'm going to cut these into 8-inch squares. And I thought using the rotating cutting mat would make that easy. I'm just cutting a little bit off. Let's see. So we have 2 sides that are squared. And it's going to be right here. So it looks like it might have a teeny bit of that curved bias binding, but that's going to end up in the seam allowance. So I think this is going to work. All right, so we have 8 by 8, and now we are going to cut it into 4-inch squares. Okay, so from one we get 4 squares, but they happen to be doubled, but it's very thin. So I'm going to keep them together. So I'm going to use the 2 layers for each of mine. So from one set of 6 towels, we are going to be able to make 24 of these reusable face cleaners if we cut them to 4 by 4. And they were $8.48 when I bought them, divided by 24. That's going to be 35 cents each for your material. And then I'm using fabric scraps, so I'm calling that a sunk cost. You need to know these things if you're going to sew and sell, or if you're on a budget for gift making and you want to try and keep things in a certain range. So always do your calculations and figure out your cost per unit. And because this fabric is so stretchy, it really makes using this rotary mat that much easier, because having to shift and line it up each time becomes a little bit more difficult when you're using something stretchy like this. And I'm just kind of stacking them so they're tilted, just so the 2 pieces stay together. And once I get all of those cut, I'm going to just cut my scraps into 4 by 4 pieces as well. And I'm using scraps from my Honeybees and Sunflowers Please fabric that came out from Riley Blake Designs in March of 2023. Often for older fabrics, you might be able to find it on Etsy, easier than in shops, but do check your local shops if they carry Riley Blake fabric as well. You could make these all the same fabric. You could do a variety like I am. It just really depends if you're starting from bigger pieces of fabric, or if you're trying to use up some of your scraps from your scrap bin. Let me know in the comments what you think. Who are you going to make this for? Are you going to use one fabric? Are you going to use a few? I'd love to know. Now that we have a lot of these cut, we're going to put the washcloth microfiber material on the right side of our fabric. And then I'm going to use clips. And we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/4-inch seam and leave maybe 2 inches open on one side for turning. And I put them on a design board as I get them clipped together. Usually I use this for quilting to organize quilt blocks, but it is going to be a good way to move these from my workspace over to my sewing machine. And if you want to learn how to make these, it's just foam core, extra batting, and fabric on the edge. I will put a link to the video tutorial. Okay, I have 8 ready, so let's just go sew those together and see how this turns out. So now I'm just going to sew around, leave about 2 inches open to turn with a 1/4-inch seam. And I am using a walking foot, or on the Janome it's called an AccuFeed foot, that helps move the top fabric as well as the bottom is being moved by the feed dogs on the machine. This is pretty stretchy. I'm just using a regular stitch and trying to hold it all in place. If it stretches a teeny bit, we're going to be clipping those corners anyway, so it should be fine. As you can see, when they were cut, it was a good square, but it did push a little bit and stretch on some of these corners as I moved. But It's a face cleaner, so it's going to be fine. Now I'm just going to turn that over and I'm going to clip those corners. Make sure you don't clip the stitching. You're just trying to get some of that bulk out that needs to turn into that corner. Because again, it is a face cleaner, I'm not super concerned about these corners being super sharp. Here's one that I did. I'm fine with them being kind of curved. It actually gives it kind of a nice shape for this. But if you want it to be sharper, I will put a link to a video that shows you how to add little pieces of thread to make these corners sharper. It's just, to me, not something that's worth it for this kind of a project. Now I'm just going to turn this right side out and then we're going to press it. You will also notice there's a bit of fuzz, so you are going to need to be aware and probably clean. If you have a top loading like me, you're going to need to clean your sewing machine definitely when you're done with this. And if you're making a lot of them, you might want to double check it after you've done, I don't know, 10 or 12, just to make sure you don't have a ton of fuzz in there that is going to mess up your machine. All right, so now we're going to press it and we're going to press that opening under. Now I have them all sewn together and pressed. Look how cute. And now I just need to top stitch around the edges. I want to keep the white on the top. So I put a navy blue bobbin thread and then I'll use white for the top thread. And because I don't want a knot on the other side, I'm going to raise my bobbin thread. So foot down, needle up, give a tug. I feel like I've shown this so many times, but I know it'll be new to somebody. Okay, grab it with my tweezers, put it under the foot, and I'm going to hold both the top and the bobbin thread right here while I take about 2 stitches forward and back. And that just keeps that from getting pulled down into the machine and creating a knot. So look how cute. Edge stitched, it's soft. We're going to have to give it a try. So I'm just going to do that for all of the squares. So now I have all 8 done. Super cute. And you can either just give, keep, store, sell them like this, or you can create a little bag. I've seen people make little mesh bags so they can put them through the laundry, but a lot of times the mesh bag they put them in isn't going to separate these enough for them to actually get clean. You need one that's kind of big so these can move around. Or I've seen people make a little basket. I'm going to do just a simple drawstring bag that would be great for gifting or selling these. So what I've done is I've taken more extra of this fabric that matches some, and it is 7.5 inches wide by 19.5 inches high. Or you could do 2 7.5 inches by 10 inches, and that's going to be nice and roomy for these and include a drawstring. So I pretty much have about 2 inches on each side because we need to have that, and then you need about 2 inches to come down to make that drawstring channel. So I could make it a little shorter. Let's see. Nah, I'm going to keep it like this. We'll see what happens. So I'm going to fold it in half, right sides together. Now I'm just going to line it up on my grid and I'm going to make a mark 2 inches down on each side. And that's going to become the channel for the drawstring. Now I'm just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam from those lines that we marked down to the bottom on each side. Now you could do a French seam. We're not doing that with this one. We're just having a raw edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a wavy rotary cutter, or you could use pinking shears, and I'm going to cut along the stitch line, just up to this line. Don't go all the way up, making sure that I don't cut the stitches. And that is going to help it not fray. Next, I'm going to clip on that line just to where the stitch line would be. That's going to help us fold that channel in nice and easily. I'm going to bring my ironing board over. I'm going to grab my hot ruler, which is, if you haven't seen it, is kind of flexible, almost feels fuzzy, like, I don't know, felted, but it has all the measurements. I can put it on here. We want to fold and press this a 1/4 inch, so it makes it really easy. I just fold it down, make sure it's on that line, and I can iron right on top of this ruler. Gets a really quick straight edge. And I'm going to flip it over and do the same. Now when you're doing the second one, you want to make sure it's going to be even with the first one. So if you have to fold it down a teeny bit more, you can. You just want them to line up. So that's part 1. Part 1 should have been fold the sides in and press. So my clapper not only helps make the creases nice and crisp, but it also pulls the heat out of the fabric. And so then it's not going into my fingers. Instead, it is going into the wood. So I apologize. This should have been the first step. But as you can see, you can make it the second step if you get ahead of yourself like I did. I'm going to refold the top folds that we did. Press those. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew all 4 of these just to hold this in place so that it doesn't come out and fray. And then what we'll do is we will fold this down and make our channel for our drawstring. But first we're going to sew these 4 sections. So I'm going to use a leader fabric. I'll just make things go faster, which is basically a scrap of fabric that I can start on and any knots will go there so I don't have to pull up my bobbin thread for all 4 of these small spots. And then when I get onto my project, I'll take a couple of stitches back. Now when I'm doing this, you want to make sure the other side is folded down. You don't want to be sewing these together. You want to be sewing each side individually. And then you just trim that leader fabric off and do the other one. Do this one from the front so I can use the leader fabric easily again. And then I'm going to fold down the side that we just did and we're going to do the other side. Now we have those edges sewn. That helps keep this folded down and the sides folded in. And now we're just going to fold it down so that this fold is just below where we stopped sewing. I'm going to fold the other one. I'm going to press them at the same time just to make sure they're even. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew all the way around and I'll just fold the seam allowance so that it tucks under one of these sides. Now, because of the style sewing machine I have, I can't fit bags and things to go around because nothing comes off. This table will come off, but it stays this wide. So I always have to sew bags and things like that from the inside where my top is going to the inside. If you can put this around the throat of your machine, you're going to leave yours like this and sew. But I have to turn it right side out and do it the opposite way. So it totally depends on your sewing machine. So I'm going to just lay this seam allowance down flat. I'm going to start back here. And I am going to pull up my bobbin thread, especially since my bobbin thread is on the outside of the bag. And I don't want a knot on the outside of the bag. And now I'm just going to sew all the way around. And this is making the channel for our drawstring. And then when I get here, I need to lay that seam allowance flat again. So let's see how this turned out. I think it could have been a bit shorter. Let's try it. Put these in here, nice, very roomy for sure. They're coming to here. So we could have done about 2 inches shorter, but this will be a nice, cute little bag. Makes the gift look bigger if you're doing it as a gift. Easy to put them in and out. And could just be a bag to be used for something else later. I'm going to try using white rickrack for my ties because I think that would be fun. So to do your ties, because we have this open on both sides, I'm going to put 2 sets so we can just pull like this. Each string or ribbon or whatever you have needs to be twice the width of your bag plus a few inches. Just be a little bit generous because you can always trim that, but you don't want it to be difficult when you're getting it together. So I just measured the one and then I will just make this one the same size. And then you could use a safety pin, but I am going to try this threader set. It comes with 5 of them and see how I like it. I think it's supposed to be faster. So we put whatever you're threading through there, double it over a bit, and then I'm just going to feed the stick through. Much easier on your hands than using a safety pin. I like it. And then you're going to bring it back through so that it comes out the other side. And using this is also why you want it to be generous. Oh my gosh, that was so easy. I love these. I'll put a link. Now for the second one, you want your ends to come out of this side. So we're going to start and stop on the side where we just looped with the first one. This is one of those inexpensive tools that if you do a lot of drawstrings or bags like that, definitely going to be worth the investment. And because it comes with multiples, it could be easy to use with a group if you're teaching 4-H kids or scouts to sew. So now you want to make sure these strings stay at least so that they are flat. So I made these way too long. Then I'm just going to knot them and then just trim about 1/4 inch from the knot. Then I'll knot this side. I usually try and make it about the same length. Clip that. And then you just put your reusable makeup removers and then you just pull and it's in a cute little bag. Okay, let's see how it works. I haven't used one before, so you're in it with me. Glasses off. Grab my makeup remover. Okay, put some of that on there. It's nice and soft, I will say that. All right, so there's all my makeup from this eye. Now let's see if it rinses out pretty well. I know I would put it through the laundry too, but just to see if we can get some of it out right away with soap. Yeah, that gets a lot cleaner than I expected. And that's just with hand soap really quickly in the sink. So I think I'm a convert. This is a lot bigger than using this. It's also a lot softer. And it's just going to be way more economical. So I think I'm going to add this to my list of things that I'm going to make for people in my family that want to be more eco-friendly, or that I just want to make something cute because you just don't know what to get them. So let me know in the comments if you're going to try this too. My name is Tara Reed. I'm an artist, a fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs, and I love to teach easy sewing projects, how to sew and sell, things to sew and sell, and quilting for beginners. So make sure you subscribe to my channel, click that bell so that YouTube will notify you, and let's just have so much fun. If you'll be hosting Christmas or Hanukkah this year, or both, or any other time you have friends or family gathering, why not make these cute little cutlery pockets? Instead of just having a plain plate with your silverware and napkins on the sides, and you can either put 3 silverware pieces or all 4. You can put the salad knife, regular fork, knife, and spoon in this pocket, or it looks just as good with just the 3 basics. So before you get your plates out of the cabinet, head to your sewing machine and let's whip up some of these cutlery pockets. So we're going to start where we always start, with our supplies. You're going to need the basics: cutting mat, rotary cutter, ruler, ironing board, a sewing machine. I also recommend a quilter's clapper. I'll show you how those work. They are one of my favorite tools. And then you're going to need 4 pieces of fabric to make this cute cutlery holder or cutlery pocket, whatever you want to call it. For these pieces, you're going to need 2 pieces that are 5 inches by 10 inches. That is going to be the inside and the back. Then you need 1 piece that is 5 inches by 7.5 inches. That is going to be the front of the pocket. And then the accent piece, I'm going to have you cut 5.5 inches by 8 inches. Now we will be trimming so that it is 5 inches, but I found using 2 5-inch pieces and sewing them on this curve and then pressing them to get this nice, consistent accent piece was sometimes difficult. So way easier to just start with a piece of fabric that is 1/2 inch wider and trim it. And I am all about everything being a little bit easier. The other thing that you will need is just a medium weight fusible interfacing. Okay, so let's look at the finished one to talk about the fabric. So you have this fabric, I call this the inside fabric, the front pocket, the accent, and then obviously the back of the holder. This one I tried without anything. It's just fabric. It has no interfacing or anything, and I don't love it. It's a little bit too floppy. I prefer this one that I made where I put the interfacing in one of these back pieces. And if you want it even firmer, you could also add it to one of the pocket pieces. I didn't. I just used it on the one, but I do like that it holds its shape a lot better. I like to have a thread that matches my front pocket because I do recommend sewing a little stitch line right along there. It just helps it stay finished. Now let's talk about all of the color options and things to consider. So this one I obviously did with a darker on the bottom, much lighter. So I just kind of continued the Star of Bethlehem up here. And then you want your accent fabric to be different enough that it's going to show, right? You want it to accent everything. And then I use the same fabric as the accent fabric on the back. You can do all kinds of things. So the one we're going to do today, this is going to be the inside. This is going to be the accent fabric. And then this is going to be the pocket fabric. And I'm going to show you how to cut that. Both sort of dark with a brighter accent. And then I'm just going to use the same fabric on the back. Here's some other ways that can go. So the first step is to make our pocket. And to make our pocket, we're going to cut the front. So the piece that is 7.5 inches by 5.5 inches, we're going to cut the angle. So you're going to start at the top corner and then 1.5 inches down. And you can decide which direction you want these to angle. So I like mine angled this way. If you want to do them this way, that's totally fine. You would just start at this corner and cut down that way instead of this corner to cut down this way. Do them consistent so that everything at your table is facing the same way. So just line your fabric up on your cutting mat, put your ruler at that corner, and then twist it until it is at that 1.5 inches down from this corner and trim. And I always cut with the fabric facing up, because if you do some facing up and some facing down, you're going to have them angled in different ways. So just be consistent in whichever way you do that. To make our pocket, we make sure everything has the direction the same. We're going to put them right sides together. We're going to center this on the accent piece, and we're going to line up this top point with the top edge. You want the extra fabric to be at the bottom. You don't want this fully centered. You need this lined up at the top. Super, super important. I'm just going to put 2 pins in there. And then you're just going to sew 1/4 inch from this angle. So just sew straight down there, and then we will come back here and do some trimming and some pressing. Our next step is to trim this angle, and then we are going to press the pocket and trim. So I'm just going to line this right up along the edge of the front pocket fabric, which is the green, and cut the angle off of the rectangle. Now we're going to use our clapper, and if you're not familiar, this is a unfinished piece of hardwood. It's usually maple or oak, very comfortable little section here, and what it's going to do is when we have pressed the seam or flipped anything, you then press down with this. It helps absorb some of the heat and really flatten that fabric to get it nice and crisp. The first thing we'll be doing is setting the seam, which basically means heating the seam just the same way it came out of the sewing machine. So you're not flipping it or doing anything, hitting it with the clapper. It flattens any little ripple you might have in your fabrics. It gets any air space that might be in that thread. And it might sound a little silly at first, but it really does make a difference. This little step makes a big difference. Now, I'm going to flip this forward and I'm going to press this seam, hit that with the clapper. Now it is time to magically make our little accent part. So for this, we are going to take the front fabric and we're going to match the bottom edges of the front and the back. Then just kind of push gently up and finger press and make sure this is an even accent piece. It's kind of hard to see. So we've matched this edge, matched this side. Sometimes it might be over a little bit. It's not always exactly matched. The main thing you want to focus on is matching this bottom edge and then making sure this is even. So that is nice and even. And now I'm going to press. One thing I love about these Christopher Thompson cutting mats from Riley Blake Designs, they're nice and thick, but they're also white on the one side, which we've been using, and black on the other side. So look at that. Now you can actually see really well what I am doing. So I'm just going to line this up, and now we're just going to be trimming that accent fabric to be the same width, which is 5 inches, as the green. So now we have our pocket. Now I'm going to just quickly run to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew about 1/8 of an inch from this seam line straight across there. I think it gives it a nice finished look, and it's also going to hold this fold in place if you ever put this through the washing machine. Because I'm going to be starting off the edge of the fabric, I'm going to use this leader fabric. And what that does is it allows you to start sewing, and if there's any kind of knot or bird's nest from the bobbin, it will be on this piece of scrap fabric and not on your project. And when I get to my project, I need to make sure I take a few stitches backwards. And then what you can do with these leader fabrics is you can turn it into an ender fabric. So if you don't want to have to do that step again the next time you start, you can just take the same scrap of fabric and sew onto it. I usually do it on the corners if I'm turning it into an ender fabric, and just leave it there until you're sewing again. Okay, our front pocket is ready. We have that nice stitch line. This is beautifully even. So now it is time to organize the pieces. So you're going to take your inside fabric and put that face up. I'm going to put the sample so you know which one I'm talking about. So this is the inside, which is the equivalent of this one. So we want that face up. Then we're going to put the pocket face up also, lining up these sides and the bottom edge. So this is what our cutlery pocket is going to look like when it's done. Then I'm going to take the backing fabric, I'm going to put that right sides together on top of the other two pieces, and I'm going to throw some clips around it. Now, just like I mentioned with the pocket, make sure if you have any directional fabric, you have it going in the correct direction. You can make holiday pockets, 4th of July pockets, everyday pockets. Let me know in the comments what you think you would use this for. Would you make these for a more special occasion dinner? Or do you just like having interesting things on your table when you're having company? I'd love to know. Okay, so now I'm going to sew down the long side across the bottom and up the other side. I'm going to leave the entire top open. Now we don't have to do the leader fabric because we kept it there basically. I'm going to put the foot down and we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I would also recommend that you use a jeans needle because this does get pretty thick, so it's going to work a little bit better for you. And in addition to the jeans needle, I would use a walking foot if you have that. I'm going to cut that ender off. And if you were making multiple at the same time, you could just continue on the next one and daisy chain these together. Our next step is to clip the corners. So we want to make these as square as possible. So I like to do 2 cuts, especially since there is so much fabric. So I come down at a much larger angle than if you went straight across and then do the other side. Make sure you leave a little bit of fabric beyond that stitch line, and definitely do not cut your stitches. Now we're going to turn this right side out. Now, depending on how you turn it, I'm going to show you this because this happened to me once and I panicked. So it is possible to turn it so you think you put your pocket on wrong, even though you saw me do it correctly, right? So you're like, oh no, we have the same fabric matching. What on earth did I do wrong? You just turned it inside out wrong. So you're just going to do this and flip it and it will be correct. You can do a big sigh of relief like I did. So I try and push that out as much as I can with my fingers. Then I grab a turning tool and I'm going to very gently push that corner out. You don't want to do it hard and fast or you could end up breaking your stitches. Lately, I have been doing this turning the edge before I turn things right side out, but I forgot to do that this time, so I won't. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push these out. I'm going to press all the way around, just making sure that those seams are all the way out, that you're not seeing the backing on the front, getting everything nice and flat. Now we're going to turn the top edge under about a 1/4 inch and press. And I always start at the seam lines and then get the fabric to match. So you can do it before or after you turn it right side out. I seem to waver. Sometimes I do it now because I forgot to do it the other way. Sometimes I do it on purpose, but either way it works. Let me know in the comments which you prefer. Do you like to turn those flaps down like that before you turn things inside out so you can really see how much you're turning down? Or do you prefer to do it from this side where it's the finished product and you can just see that edge? Okay, I'm gonna put 2 clips on there. We're almost done. Thankfully, this is a pretty quick project because you always need more than one, right? Now you have a choice to make in regards to finishing and top stitching. You know, you definitely have to stitch across the top because we need to close the hole that we used for turning. On this one, I sewed all the way around. And then I decided I didn't like that as much, but it's totally a personal preference. When you sew all the way around, you're either going to be changing your thread if you don't want the thread to show up. So if I wanted this to be cream and I still wanted to sew all the way around, I would be sewing this part in navy and then changing and doing this part in cream. I didn't do that. I just did navy all the way around and I used a bobbin thread to match the back. Now for my Hanukkah ones, I did it a little bit differently, and this is how I'm going to do this one. I just sewed from basically the top of the pocket to the top of the pocket. So I sewed from here, up, across, and down. I feel like this is just a more sophisticated look where it's not pressed down and sewn along there than this one. Just like it better. And then always matching the bobbin to the back fabric. So for this one, we're going to be putting navy in the top and cream in the bottom. Now, because we aren't starting off of the edge of the fabric and we're actually starting right here, we can't use the leader fabric. So instead, I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread. And if you haven't seen that before, here's how you do it. You're going to hold that top thread. You're going to get to where you want to start. Put your foot down. Put your needle down, still holding the thread. Pull your needle up, give it a little tug, and your bobbin thread will now be poking out. I always keep tweezers by my sewing machine so I can pull that. I can also use them to help push the thread under. You can use your fingers, but then you end up impaling your finger a lot more with the needle. So the tweezers is just a much easier way to go. Now, still holding both the bobbin and the top thread, take a few stitches and then go backwards a few stitches. And then I always go a few more stitches before I let go of that thread. And then I'm going to stop sewing just before I hit that accent fabric because we don't want to sew the pocket closed, and just go back a few stitches. So now you can see there's no bird's nest back here. I just have to trim these little end threads over there. And it is all done. One thing I love about it is it works great with 3 pieces of silverware, just your basic fork, spoon, knife. But if you just push them a little bit closer together, you can also add that salad or dessert fork in there too. So depending on the meal that you're going to be serving, it's going to work for both. This video isn't actually about wine, but it is about these round coasters that will actually fit on a wine glass. Look how cool that is. I'm going to show you how easy it is to make round coasters that you can use, obviously, for any kind of glass. I will also show you how to put it on the bottom of a wine glass. So let's get started. So here's what we need to make one round coaster. You're going to use 4 pieces of fabric for the top, which I have here. 1 for the back. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that in a second. Then you need a circle. You can get this circle that you can print and use as a template for free. Just look for the link below this video. But if you have a bowl or something that is really close to that size, this is about 4 inches instead of 4 1/4. This is going to work better because the better circle you have drawn, the better circle you will sew, and the better it will look when it is done. So I'm going to use the bowl, but the template is available for free if you can't find a bowl that is 4 to 4 1/4 inches wide. So these are going to be the top pieces. And we're also going to use pinking shears. You can use regular scissors and clip, but I'm going to show you why I like pinking shears better. I'm going to use 4 fabric clips. First, I'm going to show you about choosing the back. This is a wonderful project to use with 5-inch pre-cuts. You can make 8 from any packet of 42, and you never know exactly how it is cut. This is probably likely what you will get in a pre-cut. This one, I fussy cut from fabric yardage or just fabric scraps that I had. And the reason it's fussy cut is because I very purposefully put this manger scene in the center so that it will be centered on the back of my coaster. See, it's up a little high, but we still have baby Jesus and the lambs down there. So I liked that, but this one is going to be right in the center. I'll show you when we are done. So we're going to use this one as the back, keep that one for something else. These will be our front. And then you need a piece of fusible fleece that is 4 1/2 inches square. We're going to start with that. We're going to turn our back fabric over. You're going to make sure the shiny / scratchy side, that's where the fusible material is down on your fabric. And this is nice and soft. You do not want to iron and fuse to your iron. That would be bad. Let that cool off for a second. And now I'm going to center my bowl or the paper template, if you're going to be using that, center it on the fleece. And I'm going to use a Sharpie. It's kind of hard to get marker to work on fleece. And this is going to be on the inside of your coaster. And it really doesn't matter. You're going to sew right over that. You just need a nice line for when you are sewing. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we are going to iron these pieces in half. And my plan is to have the cream in these corners, and then this and this. These two, because it has no direction whatsoever, it doesn't matter which way I fold it. I'm going to fold that in half and press it, use my clapper. We're always going to have the fold going into the center. Okay, so we're gonna have both of these folded. So this one's gonna be up here, this one's going to be down here, fold, fold. So this is going to be this top corner, which means I need to fold it this way. And then this one is going to be this bottom corner. And the reason I chose this for the top corner is half of it's going to be covered. So if I had chosen it for down here, the top half would be covered and we'd have odd parts of the fabric. So if you're using pre-cuts, you might not be able to control this as much, but if you fussy cut, you can control this quite a bit better. So this one works really well in that bottom quadrant. When we cover the top half, we still have the wise men. If we had put this in the top, would have been okay, but that's way better. So we're going to iron this like that. If you use non-directional prints and patterns, you don't have to worry about this at all. You just iron everything in half in whatever direction. It's much more mindless. So when you're just starting, or if you're doing this with kids, you might not want to use fabric that has icons or directions, but I'm going to show you how to do it. So we're going to put these two together. The folds are on the inside, the raw edges are on the outside. That's super, super important. Then we're going to weave this one in. So we're going to line up these raw edges. And then I'm just going to move this and put it on top. So now we have 1, 2, 3. Now we need the blue here. So we're going to put the blue down, lining up the raw edges, fold on the inside. I'm going to fold this back. I'm going to lift up my wise men and tuck that blue under. So this is what the top of the coaster is going to look like. So then we're just going to take the backing, and I want to make sure it's in the same direction, not sideways. I guess it doesn't really matter, but I like to keep it all the same way. And then I'm going to put this right sides together, matching all the raw edges. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to very carefully turn this over because I want to make sure that everything here stays lined up, stays straight, connects nicely in the center. Then I'm going to place a clip that holds at each of those intersections. And you'll notice that I am doing these clips upside down because we are going to sew from the back where we drew the circle. It's clipped, everything is straight. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew around that circle. Well, I forgot to hit record at first, so I showed you in real time how slowly I sewed all the way around this circle. Our next step is to clip around this circle, and I like to do that with pinking shears. And I also like these Fisker's pinking shears. They're called Easy Action, I believe, because you just squeeze them with your hand. It's much easier than the kinds where you're doing all the work with your thumb and your thumb tendon. So I get any scissors that I can that are like this. So I'm just going to very slowly clip all the way around, close to the stitching, but not cutting the stitching. And using pinking shears is a lot easier and faster than taking small scissors and doing tons of little cuts for this curve. This is one of those tools that I think is well worth the investment for the time that it saves you and how it saves your hand. I'm just going to use my lint roller, get all the little lint off of there. Now it is time to turn it right side out, and we're going to do that just by separating these 4 folded pieces and pushing. Then you're just going to run your finger underneath there to get that curve. And as you do that, these will come back together in the center. And you want to take some time with this to get it out and curved as well as possible before you press it. Then I usually press from the back as well. Now it can be done, or if you want to, you can stitch around the edge just about 1/8 of an inch. That I usually do if I think I'm going to be washing them, because then you don't have to figure out this pressing again. It's going to hold everything together. But this gives a little bit of a puffier and slightly more sophisticated look because it doesn't have that stitching on the edge. You'll see it gets a little bit crooked sometimes. So if you're not a perfect edge stitcher over this thick of fabric, I would recommend skipping it. This also makes a great combination gift for the holidays, a hostess gift. In my Etsy shop, you can find a pattern that includes the written directions for how to make these coasters, as well as this wine bag with a drawstring. You can just put these coasters in the bottom. The bottom isn't round, so it's really easy to sew, but those coasters fit just fine. Add the wine bottle. Pull the drawstring, and you are ready to go. So the next time you bring wine, you can take it up a notch with round coasters and a wine bag. And again, you can find this pattern in my Etsy shop. You can sit any kind of a glass or a stemless wine glass on there, or I really like these circular ones with wine glasses. If you're having a party and people are walking around with their wine, this can slide right in. So you just move your wine glass around and pull these lips up, and there you go. It will help people know which wine glass is theirs, and it will also make sure they're never putting their wine glass right down on your table or other surfaces. Leave me a comment, let me know if you're going to make them for yourself, if you're going to make them as a gift to go along with a wine bag and a bottle of wine. It just could be a little bit extra for a hostess gift, or it could be great for your own parties, family gatherings, holiday gatherings, and more. So for these coasters, I am using fabric from my Come Let Us Adore Him fabric collection. This is produced by Riley Blake Designs for Christmas 2025. I don't know when you're going to be watching this video, but these are all the options. Of course, you can do it with any kind of fabric you want. I often just get asked what I'm using, and this is the collection. I'm back with another tutorial that I wish you could smell. My room smells delicious because I have been doing sample lavender sachets. I'm going to show you a few ways that you can sew these up, a few different sizes, and you will see how incredibly easy these are to do. This could be a great gift for someone that's hard to buy for, your mom. It could be a teacher gift. You could do these smaller ones and make them little baby shower or bridal shower favors, something a little bit different. Lots and lots of ways to use them. So as you're watching this, leave me a comment. Let me know what you're inspired to do with these. First, we're going to need scraps of fabric. These were made out of 4.5-inch squares. They're a bit bigger. They're very fragrant. Or you could do part rice and part lavender if you didn't want them to be quite as fragrant as this set of 3 is. But look how cute it looks all wrapped up in the twine. These are made out of 4x4, and I've stuffed them differently. You can see this one has quite a bit more lavender in it than this one. Totally up to you how you want this to work. Now this one I added a little string to, like if you wanted to put it over a hanger and put it in your closet just to keep things a little bit fresher, or you could hang it in your sewing room. When people go by it and it moves a little bit, it'll activate that lavender smell and just be really pretty. I had sewn it across the top, and now I wish I had sewn across the bottom. You want to do the little hangers, I just did 4 inches. So you only have to remember one number, 4x4 squares, 4 inches of rickrack or ribbon or whatever you want to use. Then you're going to want to get some coordinating ribbons and bobbin threads so that you're not going to have this big white line. The lavender, of course, and I will have a link to where I got this on Amazon. This is the same bag that we made the sleep masks with. It's very compact. So once you pour it out and it fluffs up a little bit, you get a lot more than you realize from this size bag. Now I have pre-cut some of these to 4x4, and one of the things that I wanted to point out was this bird fabric. And if you watch many of my videos, you'll know I'm a big fan of fussy cutting because I design a lot of fabric that has icons on it. Now look at how cute that's going to be because I centered it very purposefully, hence the name fussy cutting. I was fussy about where I cut so that this icon is going to be right in the middle. This one is not fussy cut. It's just I cut 4 inches off the end and that's what I got. So I guess that butterfly is centered, but everything else is just kind of cut off and it's just not going to be as cute. I'm going to show you really quickly how to fussy cut if you're using fabric that has icons that you just really want to be cute in the middle. Now for this, I'm also going to get my rotating cutting mat, and I love this one from Creative Grids. It's a little bit bigger than most. It's 14 inches, so if you are a quilter, this is a wonderful size because you can trim a 12 by 12 block on it because it's 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches before you put it into your quilt. And if you're working with a 12 by 12, which is a pretty standard size, it's got to hang off the edges so you can't really trim it on there. So when I was doing the 4.5 inch, I had a 4.5 inch block, and this one I love because that blue is exactly a 1/4 inch. So that's what you'll lose when you sew. So everything that you see is what you will get. So that makes it fun to just move it around. And that's so much easier to see exactly what we will get if we were to do a 4.5 inch. So this is where I really like having this because now I'm not moving my fabric, I'm not moving my ruler, I'm just moving the mat, so everything is going to stay. I'm not going to have to line anything up again, and it's going to be the perfect size. Now, another thing that I would recommend for these, because the lavender is kind of dark, I wouldn't use a totally white fabric. So for example, I wouldn't use this. Basically white with very subtle little sunshines on there, but you can see my fingers through it. So you would definitely see the lavender, which I don't think would be as nice. So I like to stick with prints that have a little bit of color to them. So we're just going to put these flowers on the back of that. Now these flowers are also directional. You'll notice the bottoms of all the stems are down here, the tops are up here. So you want to make sure you put these together so that the top is at the same side. The next step to keep this nice and easy to sew together, and it makes it a lot faster to do a bunch of them, is we're going to pre-press the fold under of this. We're not going to sew anything together, we're going to press first. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not in love with the stitching on the top, so we're going to press on the bottom. So we're going to turn it wrong side up. I'm going to grab my hot ruler. I'm going to eyeball that that's about a 1/4 inch, and then if I fold it down and it hits that line, ooh, I got a pretty good eye. And then you can just take the iron and it goes right on this ruler. If you're not familiar with these, they're amazing because you can measure and press right on there. Then I'm taking my quilter's clapper, which is just a piece of unfinished hardwood. It helps that crease and it helps absorb the heat. And if you were to use steam, it would help absorb any moisture. Now you'll notice it's not super creased because it did have to go around the ruler. So whenever I do that, I come back and I press it one more time and hit it with the clapper one more time, just to get it a little bit flatter. So now we have the bottom folded under, and we'll do the same thing on this one. And we're gonna make sure we're folding the bottom. So however many you're going to do, you're just going to cut all your squares, and then you're going to do this step of ironing on all of them. I think these would be fine to do individually if you were doing them for a party favor, like a bridal shower or a baby shower. But if you're giving them as a gift, I think they're cute to do in a little set of 3, tie them with a little bow or the little twine like I had there. And one thing I would recommend is if you are doing this for a party where you're going to be having a lot, I would put them in little plastic bags. Kind of like you would package a cookie, right? Put them in there, you could tie a bow around it, put a little sticker, thank you for coming. Because if you have like 30 or 40 of these sitting out, that scent might be a little overwhelming for some people that are sensitive to that. Be aware of that. It's also that would also be a great way to sew and sell them. Have them packaged so that they stay clean. Maybe have one out so that people can smell the lavender and make sure that they like the scent of the lavender that you have. Now, if you want to do them with the little string, or ribbon or whatever you want to use, you're just going to fold it in half and you're going to loop it so it goes in. Match these folded edges. And if you want to, you could baste it on there, but when I'm doing this, I just put it there and I clip that. All right, so we have those pressed and ready to sew. So let's head to the sewing machine. Now I have a few sets that I'm going to sew together and I'm going to chain stitch them, but I'm going to start using a leader fabric, which is just a scrap piece of fabric that I can start on so I don't have to knot. I just start stitching there, and if anything gets pulled down and get any bird's nest, it's going to be on this piece of junk and not on your project. Then you're going to take your fabrics and put them right sides together, matching the folded edges. And because these are so small, I don't pin or clip them. If you're new, you might want to, or if it just makes you more comfortable, that's fine. The most important is to make sure these folded edges are lined up. If somehow these are slightly off, it does not matter because I don't think anybody's going to be measuring to make sure every single one of these is the same size. I also use white thread when I'm just sewing all of these together, and then I change to the colors when I'm sewing them closed after we've added the lavender. So I'm going to move forward, but when I get onto my project, I'm just going to go back and forth a few stitches to knot that, and then just keep sewing around with a 1/4 inch seam. You can cut that leader fabric off. Now sometimes this bottom part will flip and open when it hits the edge of my needle plate. So I'm always watching to make sure that that stays folded. Then I also use my scissors to hold this down as we get there. I don't want my finger too close to that, and I want to make sure that goes under the presser foot. And now we're going to daisy chain this because we're not going to stop. We're just going to move on to the next one. So now I'm going to take these orange, I'm going to line up the folds and do the same thing. And then I often just cut them off as they start swinging around, since they're not going to just keep going forward like if you're daisy chaining for quilt blocks. The next steps are to clip the corners, flip them right side out, fill them with lavender, and put clips on them so that the lavender doesn't fall out as we head to the sewing machine, or even worse, into the sewing machine. So I'm just going to clip these corners, and I like to do longer angles. Gives a little bit better of a point, but this isn't a project that really requires a strong point. It looks really cute when it's just kind of curved and it's filled in anyway. So I don't even press these. I just clip those two corners, turn them right side out, and then just push that corner out with my finger. Then we're going to fill them. This is already pre-pressed under, and we will sew those together. So another idea I had was I think these could be great for like a coworker gift, or, you know, a girlfriend, girls' night gift, or favorite things gift. Maybe part of a favorite things gift. If you love lavender, you could make a set of sachets and a sleep mask for someone, for example. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Okay, I'm going to put this piece of fabric underneath. Lavender falls, we can then just funnel it from there and it won't get onto my mat. I do think this smaller size that starts with the 4x4, so it ends up about 3.5 by 3.5, is a good size if I was going to be making a lot of them. So if I was going to be making a set of 3 for like 5 of my girlfriends, I would do this because it's going to be still a great gift and it's going to take a lot less lavender. It's amazing how much less you would put in something this size than this size when the original square is only a 1/2 inch difference. It doesn't sound that much, but it's a pretty significant difference. All right, so fingers crossed. And then you can decide how much you want to fill them. I think about 1/2 to 3/4 full is a good amount. It just really depends how fragrant you want it to be. And then if they do start to lose their fragrance a little bit, you just shake them and it will reactivate the lavender. Then I'm just going to pinch these closed and add some clips. I usually do one on the end and one in the middle, and then I'll start sewing here. So I'm not going to put one there. I'll get these all filled and then we will go sew them all closed, which is going to require a few thread changes. Now, because we did press these and then sew them, you do need to be careful when you're sewing them closed to make sure that that seam doesn't stick out. Just kind of make sure it's tucked in there. But it's much, much faster to do that pressing before you even sew this together. Okay, so we have all 5 filled and clipped. Let's head back to the sewing machine. So now there's going to be thread changes so that I get everything coordinated. First, I have yellow on top and a yellow bobbin thread. For this one, that is yellow on both sides. And because we don't want a knot, I'm going to be pulling up the bobbin thread. So I put that down, hold this thread, foot down, foot up. Give that a little tug, grab that thread, and push it back. Then I can just go forward and back a few stitches. And this is just going to make sure that neither of these threads are going to get pulled down and create a big old bird's nest knot. Now you also want to make sure you have your lavender away from the edge. You want this just to be fabric on fabric. You don't want any lavender in your sewing machine or in your stitches. So now I'm going to change my top thread to blue to match this and keep the yellow on the bottom, or the bobbin rather. We have 3 more with blue on the top and they all have green on the bottom. So I'm just going to change the bobbin thread. I like doing the daisy chaining. It saves a lot of time, and as long as you clip those threads really close to the edge, I don't think anyone is going to know that you did it. All right, that's a wrap. So first let's look at these with little hang strings. Which way do you like it better? With it sewn across the top or sewn across the bottom? I definitely like that because if you're going to hang it up, it's going to be less noticeable with the stitch line down there. But either works if you forget and do it that way as well. Then these remind me a little bit of the bean bags, except they would be very light. Children would be very disappointed in them. And then we did the 2 different sizes. So you could do little piles. We could do a set of 2, a set of 3. You could do all birds. I don't know, I think it's kind of fun to do the mixed colors, makes for a fun selection. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any more easy sewing projects, fabric scrap projects, quilting for beginners, or ideas to sew and sell. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a lavender eye pillow that has a removable case. So it is going to be made out of 2 pieces. One will be the inner bag that has the lavender and the flaxseed, rice, whatever you decide to put in there. And then a separate cover that has this little flap where you're just going to open that and you're going to put this little bag in here. That way, if you're using it and you get makeup on it or you feel like you just want to clean it, you can just pull that bag back out. You can wash the exterior cover and then you can insert the filling bag right back in there. Then you just fold that over, move that around a little bit to get it all organized, and it is ready to go. I also have a tutorial for how to make a lavender eye pillow that is shaped like an eye mask, but this one isn't washable because it is just the 1 layer of fabric with everything sewn in there. I was actually surprised to learn that the ones with the removable cover were a little bit faster to make than this one, even though it is 2 layers. And that is because it is all straight cutting and all straight stitching. There's no using a template to cut out the shape. There's no sewing on a curve, clipping the curve, folding this under. This is just a little bit more work. I thought this might be a little faster because it was 1 layer, but this ended up being faster. You're going to be able to whip these up in probably 10 to 15 minutes or less once you get going. They're going to make great gifts, great things to sew and sell, great things to make the cover for our lavender eye pillow. You're going to need the piece of fabric 20 inches wide by 5 inches high. And if you're using directional fabric, you want to make sure the direction is kind of going the short way and not going this way. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to put it right side down. And we are going to press a 1/4 inch in on both of these ends. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to fold it and fold it again, hold that down, and then press that. I'm going to use my handy dandy clapper to get the heat out and really set that press. And now we're going to do the same thing on the other edge. And what this does is it encapsulates those raw edges on what will be the flap and where you're inserting the bag with the lavender, flaxseed, rice, whatever you decide to put in there. Because I'm starting off the end of the fabric and the front of the bag is going to actually be where the bobbin thread is, we want to make sure we don't get any of those nasty knots that sometimes happens when you're starting to sew. So I'm going to use a leader fabric, which is just a messy piece of fabric, which you can tell I've been using quite a bit. Just a scrap piece. I'm going to put it behind my project fabric and make sure it covers those feed dogs completely. Put my foot down, and I'm just going to start sewing on the leader fabric. Then if anything goes weird and you get one of those bird's nests, it doesn't matter because it isn't going to be on your project. So I'm just going to start. Then when I get on my project, I'm going to take a few stitches back to knot that. A few stitches back. And because this piece is 20 inches long, I can just flip it and get to the other end while that is still there. So I'm kind of daisy chaining both ends of the fabric just to be more efficient. Uses less thread, don't have to do the leader fabric again. Now we have those ends secured. Up on your ironing station, going to fold one side back 1.5 inches. Now, the easiest way is to just use a ruler that you already have. Kind of guess, fold it, and then come back and measure and see if you're about 1.5 inches. I've overshot a little bit. I'm going to move that. I had 1.5 inches. Okay, so that's 1.5 inches. So that's one way. But I also want to tell you about this. If you've never seen a hot ruler before, it's pretty cool. So it's flexible. It feels kind of fuzzy. It has all the measurements on it, and you can iron right on it. So the beauty of this for projects like this, or even when you're doing a long, like folding over 1/2 inch all along something really long, is you can put this down and you can push your fabric up against it so you know it's going to fold straight. And then you just keep adjusting it until the edge of the fabric is where you want it to be. So we want this at 1.5. So we're on that 1.5 line. I'm going to make sure that's nice and tight. And then I can just take my iron and go right over top of that. Love it. Now, because there is a little thickness to the ruler, your crease isn't going to be as tight as if you're just ironing fabric to fabric. So if you want to, you can just go over it again like that. Next, we're going to bring the other edge over, and it's going to overlap this flap. That's going to be the flap to help you put the insides in. This is going to be our washable cover. And you want this to be about 1/2 inch from that edge. Don't need a hot ruler for that. I would use something clear so you can line up that 1/2 inch mark right on the folded edge there. Bring this up. Okay, it's butted up. That's 1/2 inch. Make sure these raw edges are all lined up straight, and then press that. Now I'm just going to clip that together. You can clip or pin, obviously, your preference. And we are going to sew down each side. I'm going to grab my leader fabric again, because even though it will be on the inside, I still don't want a bird's nest on my project. And I'm going to sew straight 1/4 inch from the raw edges. Now I can feel with my finger that I am reaching this point where this first one was folded. So it's like right here. So I'm going to go forward, back, forward on this whole section so that I'm doubling up, sewing this and this underneath part. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now, because I'm sure you're hoping that this is going to be loved and used since you're taking the time to make it, you're going to want to make sure that this isn't going to fray a ton on the inside as it goes in and out of the wash. So there are a few ways to go. If you have a serger, you can just, instead of sewing straight, you could have just serged that edge. If you don't have a serger and you want to sew, you can change your foot, do a zigzag stitch, making sure you stay to the side of this. Or you can do a stitch that includes a straight line and the zigzag in the beginning. I obviously chose not to do that, just wanted to keep my same foot on there, so I sewed straight. So we're going to go back to the workstation. I'm going to show you how I am going to prevent this from fraying. So if you don't serge or zigzag the edge or do something else to prevent this nonsense going on, you're going to want to cut it either with pinking shears or with a wavy rotary cutter. So I'm going to show you both. With pinking shears, I always like to do them right over top of a trash can, and I love these from Fiskars. It's really easy on your hand. It's not as hard on your thumb as many others are. So I'm just going to very carefully go all the way up that edge, making sure that I do not cut any of the stitching. And by adding this pinked triangle thing, you're not going to have long pieces of thread unraveling when this is in use. So pinking shears are a great way to not only clip curves, but also make sure things aren't going to fray when you just want it to be quick. Now, if you're into having multiple rotary cutters like I am, I have this one that always just has a wavy blade. You do need to change this a little bit more frequently. It's not as forgiving as a straight blade, because if it isn't cutting really well, it's hard to fix that on your own. So this is a pretty new blade. I'm going to put my ruler down and make sure that stitch line is on the inside of the ruler, because again, we do not want to cut our stitches. I'm going to hold my hand flat, and then I'm just going to cut all along the edge. And I really had to do some pressure at the top, because remember, we're going through 3 to 4 layers up there. So if you're cutting straight things, it is way faster to use a wavy rotary blade if you have or want to invest in one of those. If you don't have that and you have pinking shears, that works great too. Then the cover is done. All you need to do is turn it right side out, push out those corners, and you can just use your finger, you can use a turning tool, use a chopstick, use whatever you want. And then you're going to flip this flap over, push out those corners, and you'll see that that overlaps 1 inch. And that makes it easy to then slide in our casing that has the beautiful lavender, flaxseed, rice, buckwheat, whatever you want to put in there, and it is ready to go. And then when somebody's been using it a bit, or, get makeup on it or whatever, they can just take that inside out, throw this in the wash, and I'm going to use this bee fabric for my inner fabric. So the fabric that the lavender and I'm going to use flaxseed are going to go in. Often we think about using white or muslin or just something basic as an inside like that. But if you have fabric scraps and if your fabric isn't going to show through when you put the cover on, you can use any fabric scrap that you want. So I'm going to use this leader fabric again, just to get that started. I'm matching the two long sides of this 9-inch square, and we're going to sew all the way down and across the bottom using a short stitch length, because if you're putting small seeds and things in there, you don't want them to fall out. So I am using a 2.0 stitch length. And because we're going to have small pieces in here, you want to make sure you get all the way to the edge, if not even one stitch over the edge, so that nothing is going to fall out of that little spot at the end. Now that we have sewn down the one side and across the bottom for the lining that we're going to put our lavender and flaxseed or whatever else in there, we're going to cut the corners. And I like to trim twice, just going a bit longer so there's not as much fabric that fits in there. And then over here, I'm just going to trim a little bit, just making sure you're not going to cut any of your stitches or get too close to that edge. Now I'm just going to turn this right side out, push these corners out at the bottom. I'm going to just kind of roll that to make sure that seam is right on that edge. And if these points aren't out perfectly, it doesn't matter, because again, this is the lining. It's going to go inside the cover. This is what is going to hold our material so that we have a removable cover that we can then take off and wash if we want to. Some people would then say, okay, put all your stuff in there, but I have a different way of doing it because I think this is faster and easier. I always like to fold the raw edges under and press them before I put anything in there. So whether I'm making a rice heating pad, a flaxseed pad, or these little lavender pillows or or sachet, anything like this, I always do this now because see, I'm just ironing it when it's flat. There's no stuff in here. Nothing's going to fall out by mistake. So get it prepared like that before you put your material in there. Now we need to get the pretty smelling lavender buds and whatever filler you want to put into the bag. I'm using flaxseed. It heats up nicely if you want to have a warm compress on your face or your forehead. You can also put it in the freezer and it will make a nice cold compress. I like to just make a funnel out of a piece of paper, and I like it to be a little bit shorter than, like a little bit smaller than the width of my bag. So I usually do that, like I'll fold it like that, and then before I tape it, I will make sure it's going to work. So I'm gonna open that up. All right, it's taking a little too long to get in there, so I'm gonna make it a little bit snugger than that, because I just wanna be able to put this in, get the stuffing in there, and get out. And then you can always save this for future. Just write on it, lavender eye pillow, reusable cover. So I have the cone. I'm gonna put that right in there. And then I'm just going to pour right in the top. Well, make sure that's not too flat. You want that nice and open. And I like to do about half a cup of each. I would start with that and then decide what you think. You can either pin or just hold this together, kind of move it around, lay down, put it on your eyes, see what you think. Is it enough? So now that that is done, we're just going to put 2 clips on the top, and we're going to sew that shut with a short stitch length so that none of the lavender is going to come out. Now, when you're sewing with the flaxseed and lavender or whatever you have in here, you want to have that all pushed to the side so it's nice and flat here. We don't want to be sewing over anything weird, and we don't want it escaping while we sew. We're going to start sewing on the leader fabric, then back and forth when we get on here and sew pretty close to the edge just to get this sewn closed. Because these are so quick and easy to make, these would be great for yourself, obviously. For gifts, you could use them for fundraisers. They'd be great teacher appreciation gift, Mother's Day, stocking stuffers, coworker gift. You could use them as a booster project for sporting teams that are trying to raise money for scouts. So I would love for you to leave me a comment, let me know who you're going to make them for first. how you're going to be using them. If you sell them, let me know how they do. Let me know how much you're getting for them. I love to know all the details. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make fabric trays with snaps. So when you store them, they store flat. This will take up barely any space at all, so you can make them for all the fun occasions. Make them for the holidays, make them just because, make them for your friends, make them for teachers. Super, super simple, beginner-friendly project. I demonstrate how to use this big size, which is perfect for rolls or bread at a dinner party. Use them at picnics, things like that. But I am going to show you how to fussy cut, how to take a print, decide exactly what you want in the center, and leave nothing to chance. Otherwise, this is all straight stitching, a little bit of ironing, so easy. Who wants to get started on these amazing fabric baskets or trays? Let's start by talking about supplies. Here is everything we're going to need, except for the ironing board and sewing machine, to make these cute little fabric baskets. So I'm going to be using fabric clips. You can also use pins. Of course, rotary cutter, we need 2 pieces of fabric. I'm going to be using cam snaps. I'm going to show you how to use washi tape to create guidelines that are going to be really helpful to make this quick and easy. A turning tool. And then if you sign up for my newsletter, you can get this for free with this chart and these very handy templates. So what I did was I cut them out and I laminated them, and then I can just use them over and over again. You basically take the awl that comes with your cam snap set, push it through the circles that are marked for where to place those snaps on these baskets. So I'll show you how those work. And again, you can sign up for my newsletter and get that. There'll be a link below this video to do that. I also have the full pattern with lots of pictures and written description in my Etsy shop, so I will give you that link as well. So for each fabric basket, you need 2 pieces of fabric, and I show you how to do 3 sizes, either using a 15-inch square, 12-inch square, or 8-inch square, and I'm going to be demoing the 15-inch square. So I have a 15-inch square. This is what I'm going to use for the outside of my basket. Then I have a 15-inch square, or slightly under 15-inch square, of fusible fleece. I usually use the Pellon 987F. And then I have a big piece of my main print from my Better to Wake at the Lake collection, and I'm going to show you how to fussy cut this so you have exactly what you want in the center of your basket. So like this is the small one. So I'm going to show you how to put exactly what you want in the bottom part once it's snapped together by fussy cutting this piece of fabric. You can use a regular ruler, but what I'm going to use is this nice big 16.5-inch square from Creative Grids. It just makes this process faster and easier. You can use a regular ruler and the measurements on your mat if you don't have this, but sometimes it's fun to see how different tools work and how they make your life faster. Okay, first we need to decide exactly what we want on the inside of our basket and what portion of this fabric we want in the center. I'm going to look at this chart. So we're going to cut a 15-inch square. The inside square is going to measure 9.5 inches. So you need to be paying attention to both of those numbers as we work with this ruler. So one thing that's cool about this ruler is it has, in the white circles, it has inches, 10, 9, 8, 7. In the black circles, it marks the 1/2 inch. So if you were cutting a square that was 15.5 inches, you would work off of these 2 sides, but I'm going to work off of these because we're cutting a 15-inch square. I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape and I'm going to put it right along that 15-inch mark on both directions, because then we're going to see exactly what we're cutting and we won't be distracted or confused by that extra 1.5 inches. Okay, so now this is going to be our square. We just disregard everything past the painter's tape. Now, you could also do that for the height of the side. So the sides are going to be 2.5 inches. Let's try it. This would be good to do if you were going to make a bunch of these, but it's a lot of tape if you're just making one. So anyway, if we want to mark this, we would do it 2.5 inches from that tape on all 4 sides. So this is going to be, well, I'm going to put it on the inside. Let's see. I don't want to block what we're looking at. So I'm putting this to this side of the 2.5 inch mark. And I like using this tape because it doesn't have a lot of adhesive on it, so it is not going to leave any residue on my ruler. And I'm also going to show you how to use it on the sewing machine when we are sewing these lines. And we don't even have to go all the way over because we're basically just taping out this center section, which is what we're going to be fussy cutting. Okay, so how cool is that? We now see the full size that we're going to cut, and now we can see what is going to be in the center. And when I say in the center, that means everything that's inside this yellow or orange, whatever you want to call that square, is what is going to show on the bottom of your basket or tray when you snap it together. So you can decide what part you want. You love this saying the best days. The best days include sunshine and lake water. Then you can put that right in the center. And then you can also see what else you're going to get. So let's just take a look at some other options that we have on this piece. And I purposefully cut this larger than 15 inches so that I would have some leeway. I move this like this. I'm going to have the whole bass, this saying, the go jump in a lake, all these things. There's not a lot that's going to be cut off, but it will be on the sides. So remember, everything you're seeing here is going to fold up the sides. So it's not like we're cutting all this off, it's just going to fold up. So this is what I've decided I want. Now, because this is so big, I couldn't put it on a rotary mat, but I'm making sure that everything is on my cutting mat. And I'm gonna start by just getting this whole thing smaller. I know this is not the edge that we're going to be using, but I need to get started. So that just helped me get this piece out of my way because it's a lot to spin around. Now we need to cut these two sides, and then we're gonna turn it 180 degrees to get the 15-inch square. We're gonna line up the sides that we just cut with the painter's tape. Or if this is the only one you're going to do, you can take that off and line it up with the actual 15-inch line. But I'm just double checking that that's correct. And I'm gonna keep this tape on here so I can whip up a few more for holiday gifts. So again, I'm just going to keep this flat, and I'm going to cut these sides off. Very cool tool. I love how we can tape that up, make it nice and easy. So doing this fussy cutting is the most complicated and slightly time-consuming way to make these baskets, but I wanted to show you how it worked because you're going to be able to easily figure out how to do it with just 2 pieces of fabric where you really do not have to worry about how you cut it. I just cut these fish and I cut this design. They're both random patterns, so where you cut doesn't matter. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to my ironing board and I'm going to fuse the fleece to the back side of the outer fabric. You can do it to either fabric, the inner or the outer, because we are going to quilt this a little bit to make sure that it stays really well. I'm going to go fuse this following the manufacturer's instructions, and I will be right back. Now this piece of fusible fleece is well secured to the wrong side of my outer fabric. I'm going to grab my clips. I'm going to put my fabrics right side together. Just line those up. And now I am going to clip. You can also pin because we are just going to sew all the way around the outside of this 1/4 inch from the edge. We're going to leave 3 to 4 inches open on one of the sides so that we can turn this right side out once we get it sewn together. So super easy. One thing I often like to do is I'll use an opposite color so that I know to stop because I'm going to start about here. And then if I just get on a roll and all of a sudden I'll see red, I'll be like, oh, time to stop so that we have room to turn this right side out. So I'm just going to sew around 1/4 inch from the edge. I am using a 1/4 inch foot so I can just line that edge up right with the edge of my foot. Now my foot also has these little lines on it, tells me where the 1/4 inch is. So I line that up as close as possible to the edge, maybe one more stitch, leave my needle down, lift my presser foot and pivot. And sometimes it's a little too far or not quite far enough, but you do it as close as possible and then keep going. And these baskets are so handy. Some people call them a tray. I usually call it a basket because I use them a lot for rolls and bread on the table. They don't have high sides, but they're great for little dinner rolls, for Thanksgiving, for picnics, things like that. So many ways to use them. This could be a quick and easy gift for the holidays to thank someone. Let me know in the comments how you plan on using these. Are you going to use them for yourself? Are you going to sew and sell? Or are you going to give them as gifts? I'd love to know. And now that we're getting to the red one, I know that I am close to where I began and I need to leave some space to turn it. So I'm just going to go pretty much to there and then back and forth again. Before we turn this right side out, we want to trim each of the corners to get rid of any bulk so that we can get as nice of a point as possible when we turn this right side out. Traditionally, when people trim corners, they usually just go straight across with one cut, making sure you do not hit your stitch line. So you get that angle like that. But you'll see when you turn this right side out, you have all of this fabric that is going to be on the inside, and it can get a little bit bulky. So I'll show you with a fresh corner, my preferred way. I like to do 2 cuts that goes down a little bit further to get rid of more of this fabric here. But again, making sure you don't get that corner. So I'm going to do one like this, and then I'm going to do the other like that. So you'll see it's a bit more fabric that has come off of this corner. So here's a comparison. This is the straight across, and this is this corner. So this is going to fold and give us a much better point. So I'm just going to fix this one to my preferred way, but I wanted to show you the difference. And I'm going to do that to all 4 corners. Now I'm going to turn this right side out. This is so big, it's nice and easy. You can get your whole hand in there. And just run your fingers along the sides, along all the edges, and use your finger to get that point out as much as you can to start. And then I will show you how to very gently use a turning tool to make even better corners. You'll see that's pretty rounded if you're just using your finger. But if I use this Riley Blake turning tool, and there's lots of different kinds, you can even use a chopstick. So I'm going to put it in here, and I'm going to very slowly and gently push along both sides. So I'm pushing this way and this way to get that corner out as much as I can. If you do it hard, especially because we trimmed, there is definitely a chance that you could see this blue tip come through the fabric, which is absolutely not what we want. We do not want to break the fabric or the stitching on any of these corners. So just patience wins the game on this. Nice and slow, and do this for all 4 corners. And you'll see it bows a little bit because one side has the fusible fleece, so it's a little bit thicker than the other side. And we're going to fix that at the ironing board. Going to make sure these edges are even and these corners are even, and you're going to press that flat. Also, make sure you fold the open turned edge under so that you get a nice straight line across here. So because I know you know how to iron, I'm just going to go whip that up, and I will be right back. Now I'm back from the ironing board, and you can see I got that nice and flat, and I made sure that that seam line is right on the edge so you're not seeing any of the back fabric on the front or the front fabric on the back. And where I had left it open to turn, I have that pressed under so it is ready to go. Because all of the sewing from now on is going to show on both the front and the back, I am going to do my little pull up the bobbin trick. But hold on to the top thread, put your presser foot down, put your needle down, keep holding that thread, lift your needle, give that thread a little yank, and then I grab tweezers and I just pull that bobbin thread. So now I am holding both threads. I'm going to pull them back. If your machine will do an automatic knot, you can do that. If not, just hold that. So about 2 or 3 stitches forward and then 2 or 3 stitches back, and that will lock your threads, and you will never get one of those nasty bird's nests that happens if you don't hold that bobbin thread up. And now we're just going to sew all the way around about 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that we are closing this opening that we had for turning and just giving a nice finish to the edge. I always cut the beginning threads off before I get back to that spot so that they don't get tangled in the end threads when I go to finish this sewing. Let's talk a little bit about thread choice really quickly. So for this one, because I used a navy background on this main print and navy on the back, I used both a navy top thread and bobbin thread. But on these, I used different. So I used navy on the side that would be navy and a lighter blue here, just so that the stitching would all be really subtle. And on this one, I used this green for this side, so you don't really see it, and brown for this side. If I had used matching bobbin and top thread, you would either really see that seafoam green on this side or really see the brown stitching on this side. That is a choice you can make if you want the stitching to be part of your creativity. I just like it to blend. So now we have this all edge stitched, and the next thing we need to do is go back to our chart, and we're doing large, the 15-inch square, and The sides are each 2.5 inches high. So we are going to need to sew 2.5 inches from each edge all the way across. So it will intersect and create a little square in each corner. So there's two ways to do that. We can either draw lines on our fabric and sew along them, or we can set up guidelines and you can use the seam guides on your sewing machine to make sure you are 2.5 inches. I'm going to show you how to do both. So you basically need a ruler that is longer than the 15 inches. So I grabbed my 24-inch ruler, and then you can either just take a piece of tailor's chalk and draw that line, or you can use this little Choco marker, which is another way to get chalk. So I'm just going to place this 2.5 inches from the edge, and I'm going to draw a light line. If this was a lighter fabric, I might use a heat erasable pen. So I'm going to draw that on two sides. And then when we get to the sewing machine, I'm going to show you how we can do this by just setting up seam guides and not having to draw on the fabric. And again, kind of like we taped the ruler to fussy cut this. If you're doing a bunch of them to sew and sell or for holiday gifts or for yourself, I would recommend using the guidelines on your sewing machine so you don't have to draw 4 lines on every single one of these that you make. But I like to show you options and different ways to do things. So back to the sewing machine. Now, because we're doing the large one and you need to have your stitch line 2.5 inches in from the needle, that's a little bit longer than what is marked on here. So my guides go to about 2.25 inches. So we're going to need to do a little bit of work on our own. So I am going to take this ruler, I'm going to use a hand wheel, and I'm just going to put the needle almost all the way down. I'm going to make sure it is lined up with the 2.5 inch mark on the ruler. So now you can see this is the guideline that we need to set up. So washi tape to the rescue. You could also use painter's tape here. I'm just going to line that up so that it's right along the edge of the ruler. And then I can make sure it's straight because I can see that it's even with my metal plate. And I'm going to bring it down my sewing machine a bit, just so I have a longer guide to work with. This is going to be super easy to use if I am making a bunch of these. So now we are going to be sewing 4 lines, and I always try and start and do the knot or the forward and back from the edge stitching, not over the edge. And now I'm just going to use this guideline and go all the way to the other side. Now on this side, we have the chalk line, so I don't even have to worry, but the chalk line should keep me right along that edge as well. And what these stitch lines are doing is creating where the tray is going to fold. Now you can leave it just like this with just these pieces that are going to fold up to create the sides. But especially on the bigger ones, I feel like doing a little bit of quilting, even if you're just going this corner to this corner and doing an X, gives this more stability because you can take these and throw them in the laundry, use them over and over. So you want to make sure that things aren't going to get wrinkled and they're not going to separate from that fusible fleece. So a little bit of quilting is a good idea. This one, I could also, kind of do some machine quilting and go around the fish and everything, but we're just keeping it simple. So I am just going to go from corner to corner. Before you put your snaps in, you have to decide which is the outside because these buttons go on the outside. The male and female parts go on the inside. Now we know that we want this to be the inside of our tray because we fussy cut this very specifically to be the inside. But for a moment, let's pretend we don't know. We don't know if we want this to be the inside or if we want this to be the inside. So the way to figure that out is to just fold and clip this together so you can see it in both directions. See that? And that's going to be the outside. That's pretty cute. But maybe you want it to be this way and you would just do the same thing in this direction. For this one, we very specifically knew which was going to be the inside versus the outside. So that's what it would look like if that was the outside. This is too big of a print to be on the outside. But I can show you how it could make a difference. This one could have gone either way. I made it so the fish were on the inside and this print was on the outside. But I could have just as easily have done it this way, right? Where this is on the inside and the fish are on the. So if you got the templates, this makes it easy. I'll show you how to do it without them as well. I cut these out and I laminated them. There's one for each size of the tray. We are doing a large, and you will notice it shows you the corner. So you basically just line that up with the corner like that. And then you know exactly where to poke your holes. We're going to be using the awl, what I like to call a ice pick for fabric, and we're going to push straight through there to make the hole in the perfect spot on our corner. You're going to do that both sides. Be really careful. Do not poke your finger because this is very sharp. So that is super, super easy. Now, if you don't have the templates because you do not want me to have your email address or because you did not buy the pattern, I'm going to show you how to do it without. So you would place the snap heads down in these two corners, and you want to make sure they're not too close to the edge because you don't want them going through the seam allowance, and you want to make sure they're not going over that stitch line because this needs to fold. And so you can just kind of press that down, take a pen and mark that, and then you can take a ruler and figure out where you place that. So I basically did 1/2 inch and 5/8 of an inch from that stitch line. So if I put this on the stitch line 5/8 of an inch and I mark 1/2 inch, that is where I'm going to put my holes on that side. So you can do the ruler method, or you can get this template for free by signing up for my email list, or you can purchase the full tutorial with pictures that show you all the steps to do this in my Etsy shop. And both of those links will be below this video. Now I'm going to show you how you put these snaps on using the tool. So you take this backing, or button I call it, and you push it through the hole that you made. And then you push the fabric down so that that point is really sticking out. You need to make sure that point is out as much as it can, because when you put the male or female part on there and then use this tool to squeeze, what it does, it basically mushes that point so that it holds the two pieces together. So you can see here, you can still see the point. And then this is slightly curved and it rests in the black part. And then this pushes down on the other side. So you're going to hold it like that, hold these two pieces together. You're going to get the button part sitting inside that black. This should be totally over the male or the female piece. You shouldn't be able to see it. And then you're just going to squeeze. And now you can see that that point is now flattened inside there. So you're just going to do the same thing 8 times, but make sure you have one male and one female in each corner. And it is done. So this is how it stores. So easy, does not take up a lot of space, just a piece of fabric. And then when you want to use it, you simply snap these corners together. And then if you don't like it bowed out like that, just kind of fold those in on that stitch line and finger press that, and it's going to give it a better shape. But look how cute that is. So this is the large. And the large is a 9.5 inch square bottom with 2.5 inch sides. This is the medium with a 7.5 inch square bottom and 2 inch sides. And then this is the small with a 5.5 inch bottom and a 1 inch side. So what do you think? Are you going to try any of these ideas? Leave me a comment and let me know which one speaks to you and which one you think your mom would love the best. Happy Mother's Day and happy sewing.